Hello there, and welcome to Life Beyond Seen, where curiosity drifts like a current and the vast unknown becomes a soft space to rest your thoughts. Tonight, we're heading somewhere deeper than dreams, down into the ocean, where time stretches, slows, and sometimes forgets to move at all. This is a place where some creatures live so long they seem to have stepped out of history itself. Down there, beneath miles of silent blue, life doesn't rush. It lingers, quietly defying the clock. So before we sink into that story, let me ask, where are you listening from tonight? Somewhere near the coast, where you can smell the salt in the air, or maybe far inland, where the sea is something you only hear about. And if you were to stand by the water right now watching the waves roll in, could you imagine how many lives, how many generations have come and gone beneath that same surface? If this quiet dive into the world beneath the waves feels like something you'd enjoy, a moment to unwind, to learn something gentle before sleep, I'd be ever so grateful if you liked this video or subscribed. It helps this little corner of calm find others who might need it too, because tonight, we're not just talking about the ocean, we're exploring the lives that outlast us all. The beings that measure time not in days or years, but in centuries, maybe even longer. So take a breath, slow your thoughts, and let's begin to descend. The sea waits patiently. It always has. The ocean is old, not in the way that mountains are old, crumbling slowly over eons, but in a living way, constantly moving, constantly remade, yet still ancient. Its depths are full of things that seem impossible. Transparent bodies that glow like lanterns, fish with eyes that see in darkness, creatures that haven't changed in hundreds of millions of years. And somewhere among them are the long livers, the quiet masters of endurance, who've learned that in the deep, time isn't something to beat, it's something to drift with. What does it mean to live a long time? For us it's often a number, an age, a record to be broken. But in the sea, longevity isn't a prize or a pursuit. It's a byproduct of patience, of cold, of darkness, of balance. Some of these creatures have lifespans so vast that they make our sense of time look almost impatient. Imagine a being that was alive before your grandparents' grandparents were born. Imagine it still gliding silently through the same current, unchanged, unnoticed. Somewhere in the cold black near Greenland, there's a shark that might have seen the birth of the modern world and watched it drift by like a slow ship. Somewhere under the North Atlantic seabed, there's a clam whose growth rings remember kings and revolutions, and somewhere near the edges of the tropics, there are colonies of coral that have been living and dying and rebuilding themselves for tens of thousands of years, never as individuals but as continuations of something collective and ongoing. The ocean holds these stories quietly. It doesn't brag about them. There's no celebration when a creature crosses its 100th year. There's no recognition when one simply keeps living, year after year, current after current. Longevity in the sea isn't about triumph. It's about adaptation. Everything that lives long underwater has learned how to slow down, how to waste nothing, how to exist in a place where energy is scarce and movement comes at a cost. In that slowness, in that stillness, time stretches. When you think about it, the ocean is the perfect cradle for long life. Down in the cold, metabolism slows, heartbeats become infrequent, breaths are drawn out, and growth becomes a decades-long whisper. The deeper you go, the less changes. There are no seasons in the abyss, no sudden storms or droughts, no heat waves or freezing winds, just a stable, unchanging world where survival depends on consistency, not speed. It's a world built for longevity, though few ever see it. The creatures that thrive there seem almost mythic when you first hear about them. A jellyfish that can start its life over again, a shark that might live for 500 years, a clam that outlasted empires, coral that grows slowly enough to see continents shift. Yet all of them are real, quietly existing while we rush through our brief decades. Their lives raise questions that reach beyond biology. What does it mean to live that long? Does awareness stretch with time, or does existence become something simpler, less conscious, more elemental? Can something so ancient even experience the passing of years the way we do? Or does time blur into a single, endless present, as steady as the tide? If the ocean teaches anything, it's that endurance doesn't come from fighting against change, but from flowing with it. Down there, survival isn't about dominance, it's about equilibrium. A Greenland shark, for instance, doesn't chase its prey at great speed. It doesn't need to. It drifts through freezing black water, conserving energy, waiting, patient beyond comprehension. It eats rarely, moves slowly, and yet it endures. Centuries pass, civilizations rise and fall, and it continues its silent path, unaware that humans on the surface are busy trying to measure how long it's been doing so. That's part of the fascination. We measure time to feel grounded, to mark progress, to understand change. But these ocean creatures don't measure at all. Their existence unfolds without reference points, without anniversaries or milestones. There's something humbling about that, something that reminds us how small our schedules and clocks really are. A shark that lives for 400 or 500 years doesn't care about centuries. A clam that spends half a millennium buried in the seabed isn't aware of its age. And yet, in their continued presence, they become living timelines, biological record books holding data about centuries of ocean temperature, chemistry, and ecology within their very bodies. Maybe that's the real beauty of longevity in the ocean. It's not just survival, it's memory. Not the conscious kind we associate with thought, but the physical kind written into shells, bones, and tissues. Each layer of growth, each ring of calcium or collagen, records a moment in the planet's story. Long-living creatures become archives of stability and change, storytellers in slow motion. When scientists study them, they're not just learning about biology, they're reading the history of the sea itself, written 1 year at a time in flesh and shell. If you could sit at the bottom of the ocean and watch for centuries, you'd see the world above transform while down below almost nothing changes. The same currents would flow, the same deep-sea snow would fall, the same silence would hold steady. There's a kind of peace in that idea, a strange reassurance that somewhere, far beneath all our movement and noise, there are lives that continue quietly, unbothered by time. When we think about longevity, we often picture strength, something that endures because it's powerful or unbreakable. But in the ocean, the opposite is often true. Fragility, flexibility, and slowness are what make long life possible. The creatures that last aren't the ones that dominate, but the ones that adapt. The jellyfish doesn't fight aging, it reverses it, returning to its younger form, as if time itself were optional. The clam doesn't race to grow, it builds layer by layer, barely moving. The coral doesn't live forever as one being, but regenerates endlessly through its collective body. Longevity in the ocean isn't resistance to change, it's cooperation with it. It's interesting to imagine how these creatures perceive the world, or if they perceive it at all. A shark that lives for centuries might never sense time passing as we do. For it, life could be one long drift through cold darkness, a continuous existence without the markers that define our days. It doesn't know youth or age, beginnings or endings. It simply is. The clam beneath the seabed doesn't know that 500 years have gone by. It has no reason to count. It filters water, grows incrementally and persists, unaware that above, civilizations are born, collapse, and leave ruins that crumble back into the sea. Maybe that's why we find these long-living creatures so compelling. They represent a kind of timelessness that we can't experience but deeply crave. Their slowness feels like wisdom, their patience like peace. In their endurance, we see something we've lost, the ability to exist without rushing toward the next thing. When you picture the ocean tonight, try to imagine not the crashing waves or the sparkling surface, but the stillness far below, the slow-moving shapes, the soft drifting of silt, the steady beat of hearts that have been beating since before modern history began. In that darkness, time doesn't feel linear. It feels circular, looping, patient. The creatures there don't hurry, don't look forward or back. They exist in the perpetual present, responding only to what the water brings. As we move deeper into this story, we'll meet them one by one. We'll see how a jellyfish defies aging entirely, how a shark outlives empires, how a clam becomes a historian of climate, and how coral turns collective existence into a kind of immortality. We'll look at what science can tell us about their secret to longevity and what philosophy might make of their quiet persistence. And maybe, somewhere in the space between science and stillness, we'll find something for ourselves too. A reminder that life doesn't have to be measured by speed to be meaningful. So, take another breath, let your thoughts slow with it, and imagine the world beneath you. The endless blue, the deep unknown, the timeless sea that has watched everything come and go, that carries life through centuries without ever hurrying. Down there, time is patient, and tonight, we're going to learn from it. The ocean has a rhythm that doesn't belong to hours or minutes, but to something older, slower and less defined. It breathes in ways that we don't notice, not through lungs or air, but through tides, currents, and the rise and fall of its surface. If you were to sit by the shore long enough, you might start to feel it, that subtle inhalation and exhalation of the sea. The tide pulls back, drawing the world with it, then returns as if filling its vast chest with another patient breath. Everything alive within those waters follows that same rhythm. Fish, coral, plankton, whales, all of them live by a schedule that isn't measured by clocks, but by flow. To understand how some of the ocean's creatures can live for centuries, you have to understand the pace of their world. Up here on land, life moves in quick bursts. Seasons change fast, temperatures swing wildly, and animals are constantly adjusting, chasing, avoiding, building, collapsing, starting over. Down there, the pace changes entirely. The sea has layers, each one slower than the last. The surface is restless, always stirred by wind and weather, but the deeper you go, the quieter things become. Sunlight fades, sound softens, and movement nearly stops. Down there, life has learned that energy is precious, and everything is designed to make the most of it. In the deepest regions, where pressure could crush steel and light hasn't existed for millions of years, creatures still live, but their entire existence is defined by restraint. A heart might beat once every few seconds, or even slower. A meal might sustain an animal for months. A single reproductive cycle might take decades. Growth happens in increments so small that they're invisible from one year to the next. It's not laziness, it's efficiency. In a world where energy is scarce, slowness becomes survival. And when everything slows down, time stretches. Scientists studying these deep-sea environments often describe them as energy deserts. But that phrase misses something. They're not lifeless, they're simply careful. Every organism down there has evolved to make use of whatever it can find, to live on minimal resources, to reuse and recycle endlessly. In this balance between scarcity and endurance lies one of the great secrets of longevity. The ocean's oldest creatures live long because they don't rush through their energy. They pace themselves as if they have all the time in the world, because in their world they do. It's strange to imagine that the largest living spaces on Earth, the ones that cover more than 70% of our planet, are also among the least explored. We know more about distant planets than we do about the dark trenches that lie just beyond our shores, and yet in those places nature has been refining endurance for eons. The creatures that inhabit them are masters of slow living, perfected over millions of years of pressure and cold. The Greenland shark, for example, can live for more than 400 years in these frigid depths. Its secret lies partly in its slow metabolism, a biological clock turned down so low that life becomes a near stillness. It grows just a few centimeters each year, drifts through the blackness, and survives in waters where others could not. But this isn't just a matter of biology. The ocean itself enforces this rhythm. It moves in cycles that span decades, even centuries. Warm and cold currents exchange energy across hemispheres in patterns that take longer than a human lifetime to complete. Nutrients sink to the seafloor only to be stirred up again generations later. The ocean doesn't rush to reset itself. It takes its time to renew, and in doing so, it shapes the creatures that depend on it. Long-lived animals are simply echoes of this greater rhythm. The coral reef, for instance, might seem like a place of constant colour and activity, but its growth is almost imperceptibly slow. Each coral polyp adds a thin layer of calcium carbonate, building upon the skeletons of those that came before. Over centuries, this process creates structures so vast they can be seen from space. Yet, at any given moment, the reef itself is moving no faster than a thought. The brilliance of a coral reef isn't in speed, it's in persistence. Even as waves crash above and fish dart through, the foundation beneath them is built in quiet increments, one fraction of a millimetre at a time. If you could measure time the way coral does, you wouldn't count days or years. You'd count growth rings. You'd mark the slow accumulation of life on top of life. You'd see survival not as endurance through storms, but as the ability to remain steady when everything else moves too quickly. That's the deep breath of the ocean, the constant, deliberate, almost meditative cycle of change that happens so gradually it's invisible until centuries have passed. For humans, it's easy to think of the sea as something wild, untamed, even violent. But for the creatures that call it home, it's more like a long conversation. Every wave, every current, every faint vibration through the water carries information. Whales communicate across entire oceans using frequencies that can travel for thousands of miles. These sounds move slowly through the depths, stretching time even further, allowing creatures to interact across distances we can barely imagine. When we listen to recordings of whale songs, they sound haunting and slow, but that's just because we're not used to living in a world where messages take minutes or hours to arrive. The ocean's patience is built into every one of its inhabitants. This slowness is also protective. The colder and darker the environment, the less energy life has to expend. Predators become rare, prey becomes scarce, and balance replaces competition. In a strange way, the deep sea is one of the most peaceful ecosystems on Earth, not because it lacks danger, but because everything there has learned that energy is precious. Even death happens quietly. When a whale dies at the surface and sinks, its body becomes a temporary oasis for thousands of species. They feed on it for decades, until only bones remain. Nothing is wasted. Even in decay, the ocean keeps breathing, converting loss into life in the same unhurried rhythm that has sustained it for millions of years. It's easy to overlook how deeply this rhythm connects to us. Every breath we take contains oxygen that was once produced by marine organisms. The air itself is balanced by the ocean's cycles. When the sea breathes out, the planet breathes with it. And yet most of us rarely think about this relationship. We live fast, moving from one thing to the next, measuring progress in seconds and deadlines. The ocean doesn't do that. It functions on scales that make our sense of urgency seem almost comical. Its patience isn't passive, it's active, deliberate and essential. Without it, life on Earth wouldn't exist in its current form. That's what makes studying long-lived ocean creatures so fascinating. They're not just examples of endurance, they're expressions of an entire environment that has learned to sustain itself through balance rather than acceleration. Each of them embodies a kind of ecological wisdom. The Greenland shark survives by moving slowly enough to conserve its energy for centuries. The quahog clam does the same, filtering water grain by grain, barely changing across lifetimes. Even the immortal jellyfish, capable of reverting to its youthful form, follows a rhythm dictated by environment, not desire. Its regeneration happens only when conditions demand it, as if the ocean itself decides when rebirth is allowed. The more you look at the deep, the clearer it becomes that longevity is never an accident. It's an adaptation, a survival strategy, and perhaps a reflection of the ocean's own long memory. Scientists studying deep-sea sediments find chemical traces that tell stories millions of years old. Each layer reveals a past world, different temperatures, different atmospheres, different species, and yet, through all of it, the ocean has remained constant enough for life to continue. The oldest marine creatures are simply living continuations of that memory, like threads in a fabric that never stops weaving itself. It's worth wondering what time feels like to something that lives in such constancy. Imagine a clam that's been alive since before electricity was invented. Does it experience change at all, or does it exist in a world so uniform that every day feels the same? Perhaps awareness doesn't matter. Perhaps longevity in the sea isn't about experience but presence, the ability to remain a part of the system for as long as the system allows. Humans might find that notion dull, but the ocean doesn't measure life by excitement. It measures it by participation. Everything has its role, its pace, its contribution to the flow. When you zoom out far enough, the ocean itself seems alive in the same way. Its circulation patterns act like veins, carrying nutrients and heat around the globe. Its surface pulses with tides, driven by the moon, a kind of heartbeat that never stops. Its depths store ancient water that hasn't seen the surface in thousands of years. If you could watch all of this from above and speed up time by 1,000,000-fold, the planet would look like a living organism, breathing through the ocean, moving energy in perfect cycles. The creatures that live longest are simply the ones that have synced with that pulse most completely. That deep breath, the slow exchange between surface and depth, between light and dark, creates a kind of order. It's what stabilizes climate, nurtures ecosystems, and gives rise to the possibility of life itself. It also gives the long-lived species their rhythm. They don't resist the ocean's movement, they ride it. Their internal clocks are wound not by sunlight or temperature changes, but by the gradual patterns of the sea. A coral's reproduction may align with the lunar cycle. A whale's migration might follow ancient current pathways. Everything is timed to something larger. When researchers tag whales and track their movements over decades, they discover routes that repeat generation after generation. It's as if memory itself is carried through the water. Young whales inherit ancient paths guided by instincts older than human civilization. Those same currents shape the journeys of sea turtles, eels, and countless other species. Time in the ocean isn't just long, it's continuous. Each generation is connected to the last, not just by genetics, but by geography, by rhythm, by the ocean's own slow pulse. The creatures we'll meet as this story unfolds are products of that continuity. They aren't anomalies or miracles, they're natural results of an environment that rewards stillness and punishes haste. In that sense, the ocean is a mirror. It shows us what life can be when it stops racing. It shows us that endurance comes not from fighting the current, but from understanding it. If you were to stand on a shoreline right now and look out, you'd see only the surface. Waves, foam, maybe a passing ship. But beneath that, invisible to you, is an entire world moving in slow motion. The deeper you imagine yourself going, the quieter it gets. Colours fade, sounds stretch, and temperature drops until you can feel time itself thinning out. Every metre down is a step away from the rush of life above. Down there, everything breathes differently. Even the smallest creature is tuned to the same long inhale and exhale that has defined the ocean since before there were names for anything. And so, as we continue our descent, we're not just exploring longevity. We're entering a way of life defined by rhythm and patience. The sea has been taking these slow breaths since the planet began. Within them live beings that have mastered the art of lasting. They remind us that life doesn't always move forward in leaps. Sometimes it drifts. Sometimes it rests. And sometimes it simply endures, quietly, beautifully, for longer than we can comprehend. When you drift far enough beneath the surface, you reach a place where sound moves differently. The water doesn't carry noise the way air does. It bends it, stretches it, muffles it into something softer. Down there, the world speaks in low frequencies, long vibrations that roll like distant thunder. These are the ocean's whispers, the quiet murmurings of a world that's been talking to itself for billions of years. To listen is to hear time itself moving slowly, echoing through flesh and shell and bone. In those depths, life has always been ancient. The ocean is where the story of every living thing began, and some of its inhabitants still bear the echoes of that beginning. Their bodies look strange to us because they were never meant to evolve for eyes like ours. Some glow faintly with bioluminescent light, their colours invisible at the surface. Some drift in transparent forms, almost invisible except when they catch the faintest glint of a passing current. Others are heavy and armoured, built to endure the weight of 1,000 atmospheres. All of them share something we've nearly forgotten how to do. They move slowly enough to last. The deep sea isn't new, it's not even young. It's ancient beyond measure, a place that has remained largely unchanged while continents split and reformed. Down there, change happens at a pace that doesn't fit into human imagination. Rocks form and dissolve over millions of years. Species adapt so gradually that what we call evolution is, in that context, almost stillness. The creatures that have survived in these conditions carry the memory of that slowness in their very structure. They've inherited it, lived it, and passed it on, generation after generation, until survival itself became synonymous with patience. One of the most haunting ideas in marine biology is that some of the creatures alive today are older than the civilization studying them. There are sharks in the Arctic that may have been swimming before Newton wrote about gravity. There are clams under the sand that were filtering water before the first telescopes were pointed toward the stars. And there are coral reefs that began forming when the last ice age ended, slowly growing upward toward the light, one tiny polyp at a time. These aren't myths or exaggerations. They're facts supported by science, by radiocarbon dating, by growth rings measured under microscopes. The numbers are almost absurd. 400 years, 500, some perhaps even more. And yet the ocean has been keeping this secret all along, its quiet residents living through eras we can only reconstruct through books and ruins. When researchers first began to uncover just how old some of these creatures were, it challenged their assumptions about what life could do. For centuries, longevity was thought to belong to the slow and protected. The trees, the tortoises, the species that avoided danger and grew in stable environments. But the ocean doesn't fit that mould. It's both violent and calm, both predator and refuge. Its long-living creatures aren't protected by walls or forests. They're protected by obscurity. They live where no one bothers them, where light never reaches, where temperature never changes. In those conditions, the need for speed disappears. So does the pressure to reproduce quickly or grow fast. Instead, nature shifts its focus toward endurance. Every environment on Earth shapes its inhabitants differently. Deserts create survivors that endure scarcity through efficiency. Forests create opportunists that thrive on change. The ocean, especially its deepest parts, creates beings that endure through constancy. Their cells divide more slowly, their metabolism is restrained, their repair mechanisms are tuned to prevent the gradual build-up of damage that ends most lives. When you stretch that over centuries, you begin to understand how something can remain alive long after everything around it has changed. It's not just their bodies that carry the story of endurance, but their surroundings too. The sea itself is a memory bank. Each layer of sediment at the bottom records the passing of millennia. Dust from ancient continents, microscopic shells from vanished plankton, traces of volcanic ash and cosmic debris. When scientists take core samples from the ocean floor, they're essentially pulling up the planet's diary. Some of those layers are older than human civilization, some predate mammals, and yet, above those layers, swimming slowly through that same water, are creatures that have adapted so perfectly that evolution has barely touched them. They're sometimes called living fossils, but that phrase doesn't quite capture what they are. A fossil is something that's ended, a remnant of what was. These beings are still here, still part of the present, quietly continuing where their ancestors left off. They aren't remnants, they're continuations. The horseshoe crab, for instance, has existed in nearly the same form for more than 400 million years. Its blue blood, used by scientists to test medical equipment for contamination, contains compounds so effective that modern technology still relies on them. The creature doesn't know any of this, of course. It simply continues its slow crawl across the seabed, just as it always has. That kind of continuity blurs the line between ancient and modern. When we think about time, we often imagine it as a straight line, past behind us, future ahead. But in the ocean, time feels more circular. The same patterns repeat endlessly. Currents cycle, tides rise and fall, species return to the same spawning grounds year after year. To live long in such a world is to be part of that cycle, not separate from it. The oldest creatures of the sea aren't just survivors of time, they're participants in it, turning with the same rhythm as the water itself. It's easy to forget how little we actually know about the ocean's age and inhabitants. Most of its species remain undiscovered. New ones are found every year, sometimes in the most unexpected places. A vent spewing hot minerals on the seafloor, a cave hidden beneath ice, a trench so deep that sunlight has never touched it. Some of these discoveries reveal organisms with lifespans so extended that we have no real frame of reference for them. For humans, 100 years feels monumental. For a Greenland shark, it might be early adulthood. For certain corals, it's barely a blink. But longevity in the ocean isn't always obvious. Many of the oldest organisms aren't large or majestic. They're small, unassuming, even microscopic. Some single-celled species found in deep-sea sediments may have been dormant for tens of thousands of years, only to awaken when conditions change. Others live at hydrothermal vents, where minerals feed entire ecosystems without a single ray of sunlight. Their world is timeless in a way ours isn't. The usual boundaries between life and death, growth and decay, blur when you can simply wait until the environment is right again. Every discovery of such endurance expands our understanding of what it means to live. Longevity isn't just about lasting, it's about surviving in a system that allows for renewal. Many of the ocean's oldest inhabitants regenerate constantly. Corals reproduce by budding, forming colonies that live for thousands of years, even though individual polyps may only survive for a few decades. The colony doesn't die. It renews itself piece by piece, endlessly. In that way, life in the ocean often sidesteps death entirely, at least in the collective sense. The individual fades, but the whole continues. There's a quiet elegance in that process. While we tend to see death as an ending, the ocean treats it more like recycling. Organic matter falls, decomposes, and becomes the building block for something else. A whale's body becomes a deep-sea ecosystem. A coral polyp's skeleton becomes the foundation for new life. Even the water itself is ancient, constantly moving through cycles of evaporation, condensation, and return, but always the same molecules, endlessly reused. Nothing in the sea is ever truly lost. It just changes form. This continuity gives the ocean its wisdom, though it's not a conscious kind. It's the wisdom of systems that have balanced themselves over millions of years. When we look at long-lived species, we're not just looking at biological curiosities. We're looking at the results of perfect adaptation to an environment that rewards patience. The jellyfish that can revert to its youthful stage, the shark that ages at a pace slower than history itself, the clam that counts centuries in the rings of its shell. They're all reminders that the ocean operates on timescales far beyond our own. And yet, there's fragility in that endurance. The same slowness that grants these creatures their longevity also makes them vulnerable to rapid change. A coral reef that took 10,000 years to grow can bleach and die in a single summer of warm water. A shark that takes centuries to mature can't quickly recover from overfishing. The deep sea, though ancient, isn't invincible. It endures only when the world above it changes at a manageable pace. When that balance breaks, even the oldest lives can fade quickly. It's humbling to realize how dependent these ancient beings are on stability. We often imagine the ocean as something vast enough to absorb anything we throw at it, but its oldest residents tell a different story. They've survived ice ages, shifting continents, and natural upheavals, but they struggle with the speed of modern change. Pollution, temperature rise, acidification. These aren't gradual forces. They move faster than the ocean's rhythm, and that's where the trouble begins. A creature built to live for centuries can't evolve fast enough to keep up with decades of disruption. Still, there's resilience in the system. Even as some species vanish, others adapt. Life in the ocean finds new ways to endure. Microbes evolve to break down pollutants. Fish shift their migratory routes. Corals in some regions show signs of adapting to warmer water. The whisper of ancient endurance isn't gone. It's changing form just as it always has. The ocean remembers how to recover, though it takes time. Time that stretches beyond our patience but fits perfectly within its own. When we study these long-lived creatures, we're not just satisfying curiosity about age. We're looking at models of sustainability that nature perfected long before we existed. Every slow heartbeat, every year added to a clam's shell, every coral polyp replacing the last, all speak to an understanding of balance that we could learn from. They don't take more than they need. They don't hurry. They live within the rhythm of what's available. That's not just biology. It's a philosophy, one written in waves instead of words. The ocean has always whispered these lessons, though few have listened carefully enough to hear. It tells us that survival isn't about outpacing the world, but about finding a pace that fits within it. It shows us that life can last not by resisting change, but by integrating it slowly, gracefully, one small adjustment at a time. And it reminds us, in its long, quiet way, that longevity without harmony doesn't last long. If you could put your ear to the water right now and listen, not to the waves or the noise of ships, but to the faint hum beneath it, you'd hear those whispers, the slow movements of ancient creatures, the shift of sand, the call of whales carried through miles of pressure and silence. Each sound a fragment of a conversation that's been happening since life began. It's not loud, it's not urgent, it's steady, patient, endless. The ocean doesn't speak in commands or warnings, it speaks in examples, lived out over centuries. And as we keep descending through its layers, we'll start to meet those examples one by one. The ones that never hurry, never age the way we do, and never quite die. The beings that show us what it means to live within the breath of the planet itself. The ones who whisper, even now from the deep. Somewhere in the warmer corners of the ocean, where sunlight filters down in ribbons and the water drifts gently with the tide, there is a creature that seems to have sidestepped one of nature's most inescapable rules. It's small, fragile, nearly invisible, and yet it carries a mystery that scientists still can't fully explain. It doesn't look like much at first, just a clear bell, smaller than a fingernail, pulsing softly as it floats through the water. But within that delicate body hides a secret that challenges what we think life is supposed to do. This is Teratopsis dawni, sometimes called the immortal jellyfish, and in a world defined by cycles of birth, growth, and death, it's the one creature that seems to start again. When it was first discovered in the Mediterranean, researchers didn't realize how unusual it was. Jellyfish, after all, are among the simplest animals we know. They have no brains, no bones, no blood. They're mostly water held together by a thin layer of cells and nerves. They drift with currents rather than fight against them. But simplicity can be deceptive. Within that simplicity lies an adaptability that borders on the impossible. When most animals reach the end of their life cycle, their cells deteriorate, their systems fail, and they die. This jellyfish, however, doesn't always accept that outcome. When it faces injury, starvation, or even the wear of old age, it can reverse the process. Its cells transform, not toward decay, but toward youth. It turns itself back into an earlier stage of life, as if hitting a biological reset button. The process is known as transdifferentiation, and it's one of the most fascinating biological tricks ever observed. In essence, the jellyfish changes the identity of its cells. What was once part of its body can become part of its base again. What was once adult tissue becomes juvenile, and it begins its life cycle anew. There's no clear limit to how many times it can do this. In controlled environments, researchers have watched individuals revert multiple times. In the wild, it's likely this happens far more often. In theory, that makes Turritopsis dohrnii biologically immortal, not in the mystical sense, but in the very literal one. It can avoid death indefinitely, as long as it escapes predators and disease. To understand just how strange this is, it helps to remember how most jellyfish live. They begin as tiny, free-swimming larvae called planulae. These larvae settle on a surface, often a rock or shell, and grow into a polyp, a stationary stage that resembles a small stalk. From that polyp, new jellyfish bud off and drift away, starting the cycle again. Normally, once a jellyfish reaches adulthood, that's it. It reproduces, it ages, and it dies. But Turritopsis doesn't always follow that script. When conditions turn harsh, instead of dying, the adult transforms back into a polyp. It's as if a butterfly, when threatened, could dissolve itself back into a caterpillar, find safety, and begin again. It's hard to imagine what that means in the context of time. For most life, time is linear, a one-way current moving from birth to death. For the immortal jellyfish, time is more like a loop. It lives forward and backward simultaneously, cycling endlessly through stages of existence. There's no clear endpoint, no aging in the traditional sense. It's not eternal in the way we imagine immortality. It's more like a biological rhythm without conclusion. It's survival through renewal. In a way, it mirrors the ocean that holds it. The sea, too, never truly ends or begins. Water evaporates, falls as rain, flows through rivers, returns again. Energy moves in cycles. Death feeds life. Everything transforms but remains part of the same whole. The jellyfish's secret isn't a rebellion against nature, it's a perfect reflection of it. It embodies the same logic that drives the ocean itself, transformation as continuity, not as ending. For scientists, this discovery opened up new questions about the very nature of aging. Most organisms accumulate damage over time. Cells mutate, DNA degrades, systems wear out. But if a creature can reverse that damage, what does that say about the inevitability of aging? Could the key to longer life, perhaps even indefinite life, already exist in a creature no bigger than a thumbnail? Research into the jellyfish's unique biology has inspired studies into cellular regeneration, cancer treatment, and stem cell flexibility. It turns out that the mechanisms allowing this jellyfish to revert its cells aren't entirely alien. In some form, they exist in us too, just not activated the same way. The difference between a human and an immortal jellyfish, at least at the cellular level, is one of control. The jellyfish has a built-in program that tells its cells when to change and how to reset. We have remnants of that same ability, but evolution has quieted it in favour of other priorities: reproduction, growth, adaptation. It's a strange trade-off to think about. In nature, immortality isn't necessarily an advantage. Most species don't need it. They rely on reproduction to continue the line, not the individual. A creature that never dies doesn't necessarily dominate, it just persists. For the jellyfish, this persistence isn't about outliving others, it's about surviving through transformation. It doesn't fight death, it simply moves around it. There's a certain humility in that approach. It doesn't conquer time, it doesn't freeze itself in one moment forever. It adapts, resets, and begins again. It accepts change so completely that it becomes part of its identity. In that way, the immortal jellyfish teaches something fundamental about endurance. To live long, it seems, isn't always about resisting change. Sometimes, it's about surrendering to it completely. When you imagine one drifting through the sea, its body transparent and trembling with light, it's almost hard to believe that something so delicate could hold such power. It doesn't look strong or ancient. It looks ephemeral, as if one touch might dissolve it. Yet, within that fragility lies a blueprint for endless renewal. The ocean is full of paradoxes like this: strength hidden in softness, endurance inside fragility. The jellyfish is both fleeting and infinite, a contradiction that floats quietly beneath the waves. It's worth remembering that immortality in this case doesn't mean invincibility. These jellyfish still get eaten, still fall victim to disease or environmental change. They can live forever in theory, but not in practice. The ocean, vast as it is, doesn't make promises. It offers opportunities, not guarantees. And even for the immortal jellyfish, survival depends on luck as much as biology. But that doesn't make its ability any less remarkable. Its existence proves that life can rewrite its rules when necessary. It shows that the line between birth and death isn't as rigid as we once thought. In a sense, the jellyfish's immortality is less about living forever and more about never truly dying. It's a kind of continuity that mirrors the coral reefs and microbial mats we've already touched upon. The individual dissolves, but the pattern persists. Life, in all its forms, seems determined to keep itself going, whether through reproduction, regeneration, or repetition. The immortal jellyfish just takes that idea to its purest extreme. It doesn't pass on its genes to another generation, it recycles itself entirely. That makes it not just a biological curiosity, but a kind of philosophical one. It forces us to reconsider what it means to live. If a creature can erase its own timeline, what does that say about the meaning of longevity? We often associate long life with memory, with the accumulation of experience, wisdom, history. But the jellyfish doesn't remember. It doesn't learn or reflect. It just continues. It exists outside of what we understand as consciousness, in a perpetual present, repeating itself indefinitely. Its immortality isn't a triumph of intelligence, but of design. It endures because it doesn't question its purpose. Perhaps that's part of why it fascinates us so deeply. It represents something we can't achieve, not because it's impossible, but because it defies the way we define life's value. We measure existence in stories, in beginnings and endings, in arcs that give meaning to time. A life without an ending unsettles us. It feels incomplete, unnatural. Yet, in nature there is nothing more natural than a cycle that repeats forever. The jellyfish embodies that cycle perfectly without hesitation or error. It lives, it transforms, it begins again, endlessly. For those studying the deep sea, discovering something like this is a reminder that our planet still holds mysteries that challenge everything we think we know. It's humbling to realize that in an age of genetic engineering and space exploration, one of the most extraordinary examples of biological resilience comes from a tiny, transparent creature floating quietly near the coast. It doesn't build, it doesn't fight, it doesn't think, and yet it solved one of life's oldest puzzles. Its existence also adds another layer to our understanding of the ocean's role in shaping the rules of life. The sea has always been a place of experimentation, where evolution tests its boundaries. It's where complex life first appeared, where organisms learn to reproduce, regenerate, and adapt. The immortal jellyfish is just one outcome of billions of years of those experiments. It's a reminder that in the vast, unpredictable history of the planet, life has always been looking for ways to continue no matter the form. If you were to drift alongside one of these jellyfish, you might not even notice it. It would move with the current, its movements barely perceptible, its translucent body blending with the water. It doesn't seek attention, and yet, in its quiet persistence, it embodies one of the greatest mysteries of biology. Perhaps that's what makes it so compelling, the contrast between its simplicity and the enormity of what it represents. It's as if the ocean, in all its wisdom, chose the humblest form possible to demonstrate its most profound truth, that life, when left to its own rhythm, will always find a way to begin again. Even now, scientists are still uncovering the genetic and molecular mechanisms behind this process. Each discovery leads to more questions than answers. Could similar principles be used to slow human aging? Can we learn from a creature that knows how to undo time at the cellular level? The research is ongoing, but the jellyfish itself doesn't wait for understanding. It keeps drifting, pulsing, resetting, continuing its quiet cycle in the depths. While we analyse and theorise, it simply exists, doing what it has always done. And maybe that's the larger lesson. The ocean doesn't need to explain itself. Its inhabitants don't strive for meaning or legacy. They live according to the conditions around them, adapting without complaint, changing without hesitation. The immortal jellyfish doesn't ask why it can start again. It just does. In that simplicity lies a kind of peace that humans rarely experience. We're constantly aware of time, always measuring, planning, fearing its passage. The jellyfish doesn't carry that burden. It flows with time until time ceases to matter. If you think about it, immortality, at least in this sense, isn't freedom from time, it's acceptance of it. The jellyfish doesn't escape the cycle, it becomes it. It's both the beginning and the end, the larva and the adult, the old and the new. It embodies continuity without needing to control it. There's a kind of quiet wisdom in that. Perhaps that's why so many people, even outside of science, are drawn to its story. It feels like an allegory written by nature itself, a reminder that renewal isn't a miracle, but a pattern we've simply forgotten how to see. Somewhere right now, under the surface of the Mediterranean or the Pacific, one of these tiny creatures is performing that transformation again. It's dissolving its adult form, returning to its foundation, ready to start a new life identical to the one it left behind. No one will notice, no one will measure it, but it will happen nonetheless, as it has countless times before. In the ocean's slow, endless conversation, the jellyfish adds another quiet sentence, one that says, everything can become new again if it knows how to let go. And as we drift further through these waters, we'll begin to see that this lesson doesn't belong to the jellyfish alone. The ocean holds others that live almost as long, not through rebirth, but through patience and cold and stillness. In their longevity, we'll find new ways of understanding endurance, not as defiance of time, but as harmony with it. In the far reaches of the northern oceans, where ice drifts in silence, and the light fades into a grey that never quite becomes day, there lives a creature that moves so slowly it might as well be still. It swims through waters so cold that most living things would freeze or flee, but it doesn't hurry, it doesn't fight, and it doesn't seem to notice the cold at all. This is the Greenland shark, and of all the animals that call the ocean home, it may know time better than any other. It is one of the longest living vertebrates on Earth, a being so patient that it measures its life not in decades or centuries, but in the quiet endurance of centuries stacked upon centuries. At first glance, there's nothing extraordinary about it. It doesn't shine or shimmer, it isn't massive like a whale or graceful like a dolphin. It's a sluggish, grey creature with a blunt snout and small, tired eyes, often covered by parasites that dangle from their surface. It can grow up to 20 feet long and weigh more than a ton, yet it moves at a pace that feels almost suspended in time. A slow, deliberate glide through dark water, each movement conserving precious energy. It lives where the sea is heavy with ice and silence, in the deep, cold currents of the North Atlantic and Arctic. It is, in every sense, a relic of patience. When scientists first began studying these sharks seriously, they were baffled by their age. Early estimates placed their lifespans at well over 200 years, but later research using radiocarbon dating on the lens of their eyes, one of the few parts of a body that doesn't regenerate, revealed something far more staggering. Some individuals were found to be nearly 400 years old. A few may have hatched when the world was still in the late Renaissance, before the Industrial Age began, before humans even knew what lay beneath the ice. While empires rose and fell, while entire civilizations came and went, these sharks were simply swimming in the same dark water, doing what they had always done. Their longevity isn't magic, it's biology sculpted by environment. In the deep, cold sea, everything slows down. The water temperature near freezing, the scarcity of food, and the absence of predators create a world where survival depends on conservation. The Greenland shark's metabolism runs at a fraction of the speed of most animals. Its heart beats slowly, its cells divide rarely, its growth rate is barely noticeable, perhaps a centimetre a year. It doesn't rush to maturity, it doesn't even reach reproductive age until it's over a century old. In that stillness, it avoids many of the stresses that shorten other lives. The cold preserves, the darkness protects, and the shark endures. This slow life has another effect, a kind of invisibility. Few creatures see the Greenland shark. It lives in depths humans rarely reach, and even when it comes closer to the surface, it moves without urgency, like a shadow in the water. It doesn't need to hunt often. Its diet consists mostly of whatever drifts within reach. Fish, seals, even the occasional carcass. It's not a predator in the cinematic sense. It's an opportunist, a scavenger, a quiet participant in the recycling of life. Some have even found reindeer remains in their stomachs, not because they chased one down, but because the ocean eventually brings everything back to it. There's something poetic about that patience, though the creature itself would never know it. It moves through a world where light barely reaches, where seasons mean almost nothing, where the same cold water has been circling the planet for thousands of years. The shark's existence is one of steady persistence. No drama, no hurry, no need for change. It's the embodiment of a life lived entirely within the pace of the planet itself. To understand how this shark can live so long, you have to think about what aging really is. In most animals, it's the accumulation of damage, the gradual breakdown of cells and tissues that the body can't fully repair. Heat, oxygen, radiation, and metabolism all contribute to this slow decay. But in the icy world of the Greenland shark, those forces are weakened. Cold slows chemical reactions. Low energy usage reduces wear. The result is a body that degrades at an almost imperceptible rate. Its very environment acts like a natural preservative, keeping time at bay. It's as if the shark's life exists in a kind of suspended animation, not frozen, but slow to the point where centuries pass like seasons. Its organs age, but so gradually that they outlast the memory of everything happening above. That concept challenges our sense of time completely. A human life, with all its ambitions, worries and achievements, unfolds in a blink compared to the shark's. To imagine what it has witnessed, if witnessing is even the right word, is almost impossible. While humans discovered electricity, crossed oceans and split atoms, the shark simply kept swimming. Its rhythm never changed. What makes this even more remarkable is how little the shark seems to have evolved. Like many deep-sea creatures, its lineage stretches far back, remaining largely unaltered for millions of years. When something works perfectly in its environment, evolution slows down. The shark's slow growth and long life aren't inefficiencies, they're perfection tuned to the rhythm of the deep. Every adaptation, from its cold-tolerant enzymes to its sluggish metabolism, is a response to scarcity and stillness. It has become so well suited to endurance that speed, in any form, would be wasteful. It's difficult for us to relate to such an existence. We live in constant acceleration, measuring life by productivity, by progress, by deadlines. The Greenland shark's world has no such metrics. It lives in continuous present tense. It doesn't race toward a goal, doesn't anticipate, doesn't remember in the way we do. Its existence is stripped down to its simplest function, persistence. To live long enough to reproduce, to keep moving, to remain part of the cycle. That simplicity, though, hides an astonishing resilience. The shark's tissues contain compounds, like trimethylamine oxide, or TMAO, that allow it to function at freezing temperatures and under immense pressure. Those same compounds make its flesh toxic to humans, giving it an unpleasant, even dangerous taste if eaten raw. In Greenland, people once found a way to make it edible by burying it and letting it ferment, transforming the poison into something survivable. It's called hakal, a dish that tastes of ammonia and history, though the shark itself would never know that its presence in these waters helped sustain human cultures for centuries. In many ways, the Greenland shark feels like the ocean's quiet observer. It doesn't react quickly to change, but it's been there through all of them. When glaciers advanced and retreated, when sea levels rose and fell, it continued to swim beneath the ice, undisturbed. If the ocean has a memory, it might look something like this creature, ancient, slow, enduring, unchanged. Its body carries chemical signatures of centuries-old water, its tissues recording the temperature, the salinity, the invisible history of its surroundings. To scientists, studying it is like reading a diary written over hundreds of years. The carbon in its eye lens holds clues about when it was born, while the isotopes in its flesh reveal where it has been feeding. Each discovery adds another piece to the puzzle of how life can stretch across centuries. Yet, even now, there are more unknowns than answers. We don't know exactly how old the oldest shark can be. We don't know how it navigates or how often it reproduces. Much of its life remains hidden, as if the ocean itself prefers to keep a few secrets for itself. There's something grounding about that mystery. It reminds us that not everything needs to be uncovered to be meaningful. The Greenland shark doesn't reveal its story easily. It's a creature that teaches patience simply by existing. Every time one drifts past a research camera, every time a trawl net briefly captures one, it feels like a glimpse not just into the deep sea, but into deep time. A momentary meeting between the world that rushes and the world that waits. What's even more striking is how gentle this endurance appears. Despite its size and age, the Greenland shark is not a fierce predator. It's slow, deliberate, almost passive. It feeds when opportunity allows, rests when it must, moves only as much as it needs to. Its success lies not in dominance, but in its refusal to waste energy. In a way, it's the opposite of almost everything humans value. It doesn't chase more than it requires. It doesn't seek growth for its own sake. It lives within the narrow balance of its environment, and that balance rewards it with time. That might be the real secret to its longevity. Not the cold, not the chemistry, not the slow metabolism, but the balance. The perfect alignment between creature and environment, between what it takes and what it gives. Every system that lasts, whether a coral reef, a forest, or a single shark, exists in that state of equilibrium. Break it, and time catches up quickly. Maintain it, and time becomes almost irrelevant. The Greenland shark has maintained it for centuries, adapting to changes that would destroy faster species. It doesn't resist the ocean's rhythm, it follows it precisely. When you think about how it moves through its world, it's easy to imagine the calm that must define its existence. No rush, no alarm, just the endless slow motion of the deep. In its simplicity, there's a kind of wisdom we've forgotten. It doesn't live long because it's trying to. It lives long because it doesn't interfere with its own continuity. It doesn't fight time. It allows time to move around it, to flow through it. In that surrender lies endurance. Somewhere under the ice right now, a Greenland shark is gliding through water that hasn't seen sunlight in months. Above it, storms are raging, icebergs are shifting, and yet, down there, everything feels still. The water is heavy, the temperature stable, the sound low and distant. The shark's body moves with minimal effort, its slow rhythm perfectly matched to the drag of the sea. It has done this for hundreds of years and will continue to do it for hundreds more. It doesn't know how long it has lived, and it doesn't need to. Its existence isn't measured that way. It simply continues, and in that continuation, it becomes timeless. There's something deeply human in the way we react to such endurance. We can't help but project meaning onto it. We call it patience, wisdom, serenity. We imagine it carrying the memory of the world in its ancient body. But perhaps that's just our way of filling the silence. The shark doesn't know it's old. It doesn't remember the past or anticipate the future. Its patience isn't a virtue, it's a condition of life in the deep. And yet, when we observe it, we see in it the reflection of something we long for: stability, endurance, peace. Maybe that's why these stories matter. They remind us that time isn't always a force to be fought. It can be something to drift with, something to inhabit rather than conquer. The Greenland shark has mastered that art through instinct, not thought. But in watching it, we remember that it's possible, that slowness can be strength, that simplicity can be the most effective form of survival, that the quiet, cold patience of a creature beneath the ice might hold the same lesson the ocean has been whispering all along, that life endures best when it stops trying to outrun time. As we continue our journey through these waters, leaving the shark behind in its frozen calm, other forms of longevity await us. Some are buried in shells that have watched centuries go by. Others live in sprawling colonies that never sleep. The ocean is full of them, different faces of endurance, different expressions of the same idea. The Greenland shark may be the oldest of them all, but it's only one verse in the ocean's long story of time. In the cold waters of the North Atlantic, buried just beneath the seafloor, lives a creature that has outlasted empires. It doesn't move much, it doesn't make a sound, and most of the time it's completely hidden. Its shell looks like any other clam's, plain and unassuming, coated in grains of sand and bits of silt. But within that shell, sealed away from the noise of the surface world, is one of the longest lives ever recorded on Earth. The ocean quahog, a modest bivalve no bigger than a human hand, can live for centuries. Some have been found to be more than 500 years old. When one of these clams was dredged up near Iceland in 2006, researchers named it Ming because it had been alive during the Ming dynasty, long before electricity, before engines, before telescopes saw beyond our atmosphere. It had been filtering water at the bottom of the sea while the world changed above, unaware that time itself had been quietly passing by. What makes this unremarkable-looking animal so extraordinary isn't just its age, but the simplicity of how it survives. The ocean quahog spends almost its entire existence half buried in sediment, with only its siphons exposed. Through these narrow tubes it draws in water, filters out tiny food particles, plankton, organic debris, and releases the rest. It doesn't chase prey or flee from predators. It doesn't travel or hunt. Its world is small, defined by the slow rhythm of the tide and the gentle flow of cold water above, and yet in that stillness, it achieves something nearly every other creature fails to do. It persists, quietly, steadily, far beyond the span of most known lives. The cold helps. The waters where it lives are near freezing year-round, the kind of cold that slows every process in the body. Just like the Greenland shark, the ocean quahog has adapted to an environment where energy is precious, where speed is unnecessary, where life moves at a pace that barely registers to us. Its metabolism runs slow, almost deliberately so. The clam's heart beats perhaps once every few seconds, sometimes even slower. Its growth rate is minimal, adding only a fraction of a millimetre to its shell each year. To the human eye, it would appear frozen in time, but inside, it's alive. Alive in the most patient sense of the word. When scientists study these clams, they don't just count their years, they read them. Each ring on the shell, much like the rings in a tree, records a season of growth, a reflection of the surrounding environment. Thick bands form in good years when food is plentiful. Thin ones appear in times of scarcity. By counting and analysing these layers, researchers can reconstruct centuries of ocean history. Temperature changes, currents, even shifts in chemical composition, all of it is written into those shells. The clam becomes not just a survivor, but a storyteller, holding in its calcium shell a record of how the sea itself has changed through time. In that sense, every ocean quahog is both a creature and a chronicle. When scientists sliced open Ming's shell, they found evidence of climate patterns that matched human records going back hundreds of years. The clam had lived through volcanic winters, through the Little Ice Age, through eras when ships still relied on sails, and through all of it, it had done the same thing it always did. Filtered water, grew slowly, waited. Its existence didn't react to the chaos of the surface world. It endured beneath it. This unassuming bivalve offers a kind of wisdom that feels almost philosophical. Its strategy is not to fight, not to adapt rapidly, but to be consistent. Everything about it is designed for longevity. Its cells divide slowly, reducing the accumulation of damage over time. Its proteins are remarkably stable, resistant to the misfolding and decay that accompany aging in other animals. Its metabolism, kept at the bare minimum, produces fewer harmful byproducts. Even its immune system functions differently, prioritizing steady maintenance over rapid response. In biology, these small differences compound over centuries, creating a body that ages not in decades but in epochs. But what's fascinating is that longevity wasn't the goal of evolution here. It was a side effect. The clam's long life isn't about outlasting others, it's about efficiency. It's a natural outcome of living in an environment that changes so slowly that rushing would be wasteful. The ocean quahog is perfectly in tune with the tempo of its surroundings. Its slow pace isn't laziness, it's precision. Everything it does, from feeding to repairing its cells, happens only as fast as it needs to. That synchronization between organism and environment is what allows it to endure so long. Imagine what that life feels like, if feeling is even the right word. For half a millennium, this clam has existed in silence. It has never seen light beyond the faint shimmer that filters through the water. It has never moved more than a few inches from where it first settled. The world above has transformed beyond recognition. Nations have formed and fallen. Technology has reshaped the planet. But down there, beneath a few meters of sand, everything is the same. The same currents, the same seasonal rhythms, the same faint hum of the ocean. Time, as we know it, loses its meaning in that constancy. The clam doesn't know how old it is. It doesn't need to. Its survival doesn't depend on awareness, only on rhythm. Every cell in its body participates in that rhythm, slowing and conserving. Even death, when it finally comes, is not dramatic. The clam simply stops filtering. Its shell remains behind, intact, slowly becoming part of the sediment it once lived in. Over time, it merges with the seabed, indistinguishable from the millions of others that came before it. Yet within that shell, even long after it's gone, the story remains. Scientists can still read it centuries later, still listen to the faint trace of the ocean's memory preserved in calcium and growth lines. There's something quietly humbling about that. We often think of memory as something exclusive to consciousness, to brains capable of thought. But the ocean quahog proves otherwise. Memory exists in structure, in pattern, in matter. The sea remembers through its creatures. It keeps track of itself not in words or images, but in chemistry and form. Each ring on that clam's shell is a record of temperature, of nutrients, of the subtle shifts that have shaped the planet. When researchers line up the shells of multiple clams, they can map the rhythm of centuries, an unbroken story told by beings that never spoke, never saw, never knew. The discovery of just how old these clams could be changed the way scientists view aging altogether. Before that, longevity was thought to belong mostly to large, complex creatures, whales, turtles, humans. But here was a small, simple animal that had quietly surpassed them all. Its long life wasn't the result of complexity but simplicity. Its strategy wasn't to evolve intelligence or mobility but stability. It had found a way to make slowness a form of strength. In a world driven by speed, it's difficult to imagine a life built on stillness. But that's the paradox of endurance. The longer something lasts, the less it tends to change. The clam doesn't chase novelty. It exists in a closed loop of repetition, the same actions performed thousands of times over centuries. There's a kind of beauty in that monotony, the same beauty found in the ocean itself, the endless repetition of waves, tides, and currents that never tire of returning. The clam's life is an echo of that larger pattern, a microcosm of the sea's own patience. If you could watch one from the moment it was born, the changes would be almost imperceptible. The tiny larva drifting in the plankton would eventually settle on the seafloor, anchoring itself to sand or gravel. Over the years, its shell would grow thicker, its rings accumulating like the pages of a book being written one line at a time. Decade after decade, it would continue filtering, building, enduring. Storms might pass above, but they wouldn't reach it. The ice might advance and retreat. The climate might warm and cool, but the clam would remain, part of a continuity that ignores human time completely. When you consider how many of them exist across the seafloor, it becomes clear that the ocean is covered in history. Millions of these tiny archivists, each one holding a fragment of Earth's story within its shell. They aren't aware of their role, but collectively they form one of the most detailed natural records we have. Long after human archives fade or decay, their shells will still be there, buried under layers of sand, holding the imprint of a world that changed far slower than we remember it. The longevity of the ocean quahog also raises another question. What does aging mean when time itself is almost irrelevant? For creatures like this, aging isn't decline, it's simply continuation. The processes that define aging in humans, cellular damage, metabolic stress, disease, happen so slowly that they barely register. Aging for the quahog is just life. There's no fear of an end, no anticipation of death. Its existence isn't defined by duration, but by consistency. In that sense, its life is as close to timelessness as biology allows. Even now, scientists are studying its genome to uncover the molecular keys to that longevity. They've found that its cells are remarkably efficient at maintaining proteins and preventing oxidative stress. Some of its genetic traits resemble those in other long-lived species, like the bowhead whale and the naked mole rat, both known for their resistance to aging. But in the clam, these adaptations seem even more pronounced. It's as though nature, in the quiet cold of the sea, perfected the art of maintenance. No grand complexity, no reinvention, just steady, faithful repair. What's striking is how this biological success story is hidden behind such ordinariness. The ocean quahog doesn't look ancient. It doesn't carry the weight of its years in any visible way. To anyone who finds it, it's just another shell, another piece of the sea floor. Its greatness is invisible, its age unknowable without careful study. That invisibility mirrors the ocean itself, vast, silent, full of secrets that only patience can reveal. In the end, the story of this clam is not about immortality, but about endurance through balance. It doesn't resist time, it harmonizes with it. It doesn't seek to outlive others. It simply doesn't waste the gift of stability it's been given. Every part of its life, its slow metabolism, its simple structure, its stillness, exists in service of continuity. That's why it can live so long. It's not a rebellion against decay. It's an understanding of how to coexist with it. Somewhere beneath the grey waters of the North Atlantic right now, there are thousands of them, quietly filtering, growing, adding another thin ring to their shells. They don't know the meaning of years or centuries. They just continue, as they always have. Each one is a tiny echo of the ocean's patience, a small reminder that longevity doesn't always come from striving. It can come from being perfectly in sync with the world around you. As we move onward through this slow descent into the lives of Earth's oldest beings, the clam's lesson remains behind us like a faint trail in the sand. That endurance doesn't need motion, that time can be kept not by counting but by being, and that the ocean remembers everything, even through creatures too humble to realize it. Ahead, other ancient lives await, living not beneath sand but woven into stone and colour, building vast underwater structures that hold their own quiet records of centuries. Beneath the warm shallows of tropical seas, where sunlight filters through water like liquid glass, there lies a city that never sleeps. It doesn't glitter with lights or pulse with machinery, but it's alive with the constant rhythm of creation. Every surface is busy, every crevice inhabited. Tiny builders work without pause, adding to walls and towers that have stood for thousands of years. To the casual eye, it might look like stone, solid, unmoving, ancient. But that stillness is an illusion. What you're looking at is life layered upon life, a structure made from the slow labour of countless small creatures. It is the coral reef, one of the oldest and most enduring communities on the planet, a place where time moves through growth and renewal rather than decay. If you were to dive down into one of these reefs, you might first notice the colour, the vibrant blues, oranges and pinks that seem too vivid to be real. Fish weave through branching corals, their scales flashing like sparks. Rays of sunlight dance across the sand. Everything moves together in a kind of slow choreography. But beneath the beauty, beneath the colour and noise, there's an ancient process at work. Each coral polyp, no bigger than a grain of rice, spends its life building a limestone skeleton around itself, creating the foundation for generations to come. When it dies, another grows on top of it, and another after that, forming the massive structures we call reefs. These are not individual lives, they're collective ones. The reef isn't a creature, it's a colony, a community of millions acting as one, an unbroken continuum of growth. What makes coral so remarkable is that it blurs the line between life and stone. It builds while alive, and even in death, its remains become part of the living structure. The reef grows upward and outward over centuries, shaped by light, water temperature and chemistry. Some reefs began forming more than 10,000 years ago, when the last ice age ended and the seas began to rise. Since then, they've been continuously growing, eroding and rebuilding themselves, generation after generation. To think about that kind of continuity is to think in a different kind of time. A time not measured in days or years, but in cycles of renewal. The Great Barrier Reef, for example, stretches for more than 400 miles along the coast of Australia. It's visible from space, vast enough to be compared to a living continent. But even the smallest coral reefs share its same essence. They're ecosystems built on patience and repetition, structures that tell the story of slow persistence. Each coral polyp lives for only a few years, maybe a decade at most, but its skeleton remains for centuries, layered with those of its descendants. The result is an immortal architecture, constantly regenerating, never entirely new, never entirely old. It's easy to think of coral as delicate, and in many ways it is. It can bleach and die from heat, pollution or acidifying oceans. But what's often overlooked is just how resilient it can be when given time. Some reefs have recovered from massive disturbances, rebuilding themselves from fragments left behind. The same polyps that seem so fragile are capable of regeneration. Even a small piece can start a new colony. That resilience, hidden beneath apparent vulnerability, has allowed coral to persist for millennia, outlasting species, climates, and civilizations. To understand its endurance, you have to look closely at its design. Coral is a symbiosis, a partnership between the animal and the microscopic algae that live within its tissues. The algae, called zooxanthellae, provide food through photosynthesis, and in return the coral offers them shelter. Together they create the foundation for life in tropical seas. Without that partnership, neither could thrive. The coral's growth, its colour, its energy, all come from that invisible cooperation. It's a relationship that has lasted for millions of years, one that has shaped entire ecosystems. That relationship also explains why coral reefs are so ancient. It's not a single species that endures. It's a network of interdependence. Every creature on the reef, from the smallest shrimp to the largest fish, plays a role in maintaining the system. Grazers keep algae in check. Predators balance populations. Scavengers recycle nutrients. The coral itself builds the home, providing space for others to live. It's a living city where every inhabitant contributes to the stability of the whole. And like any city that lasts, it depends on balance. When you look at a coral reef, you're seeing more than beauty. You're looking at a time machine. Each layer of coral tells a story about the conditions in which it grew. The temperature of the water, the chemistry of the sea, the nutrients drifting through. Scientists can drill into coral skeletons the way they might study ice cores, reading centuries of ocean history. Each band in the calcium carbonate is a record of seasons long past. It tells of warm years and cool years, of volcanic eruptions and monsoons, of changing currents and cycles of life that extend beyond memory. In this way, coral is both alive and archival. It's a structure that breathes and remembers. While individual polyps come and go, their work remains, building a continuity that outlives them all. It's the same principle that defines longevity across the ocean. Survival not as resistance, but as renewal. Where the Greenland shark endures through slowness, and the ocean quahog through stillness, coral endures through cooperation. Its immortality is collective, not individual. That distinction matters. In the human sense, longevity often feels solitary, a single life extended beyond its normal span. In the ocean, it's rarely that simple. The coral's endurance is shared. No single organism lives for thousands of years, but the structure they create does. It's a form of distributed immortality, where death itself becomes part of the process that sustains life. When a polyp dies, it leaves behind the mineral framework for others. The reef doesn't mourn the loss, it builds upon it. That quiet acceptance, that transformation of ending into foundation, is what keeps it alive. The ocean's oldest reefs have seen ice ages come and go. They've survived periods when sea levels rose and fell by hundreds of feet. They've endured when continents shifted, when currents changed direction, when temperatures fluctuated in ways that would destroy many modern ecosystems. They persist because they don't resist change. They adapt slowly, layer by layer. They move with the water, expand into the light, retreat into shadow, always adjusting but never rushing. In many ways, coral is the perfect expression of the ocean's philosophy. Nothing wasted, nothing rushed, everything connected. Its life cycle mirrors the sea's own cycles, ebb and flow, growth and decay, loss and renewal. Even when a reef bleaches and looks dead, it's often still alive underneath, waiting for conditions to return, ready to rebuild. That ability to endure through cycles of destruction and rebirth is what makes coral one of the planet's most ancient survivors. The idea of an animal creating something that outlasts itself is deeply moving. It's not ambition that drives the coral, It's instinct. Each polyp adds its small contribution without ever seeing the full result. The reef grows not from grand design, but from countless simple acts of persistence. There's a humility in that, a quiet reminder that endurance is built from repetition, not spectacle. If you could compress time and watch a reef over millennia, you'd see it rising like a living mountain, growing inch by inch, collapsing in parts, then growing again. You'd see storms tearing sections away, only for new life to rebuild. You'd see species arriving, disappearing, returning. To human eyes, those cycles would look like change, but to the reef, their continuity. Its sense of time is broader than ours, its patience deeper. In a sense, coral is the ocean's way of writing permanence into impermanence. It builds something lasting out of what is temporary. Each generation contributes to the next, creating a monument not of stone but of life. And yet, for all its endurance, coral's strength comes from cooperation. No part can survive alone. Every piece depends on the rest. That interconnection is what gives it longevity. Without the algae, the coral starves. Without the coral, the algae have no home. Without the fish, the balance shifts and the system falters. Longevity, it seems, is never solitary. It's communal. That truth runs through everything in the sea. The ocean doesn't favour isolation, it rewards connection. The longest-lived creatures aren't necessarily the largest or strongest. They're the ones that exist in harmony with others, the ones that participate rather than dominate. The coral reef is perhaps the clearest example of that harmony turned into structure. It's the ocean's version of a city that thrives on balance, where every part supports the rest. When night falls, the reef changes but doesn't stop. The daytime fish retreat, the nocturnal ones emerge. Crustaceans crawl across the coral surface, feeding and cleaning. Polyps extend their tentacles to catch drifting plankton, glowing faintly under the light of the moon. The reef breathes, exhales oxygen, hums with quiet energy. It's never still, never silent. It doesn't sleep because the ocean doesn't. The rhythm simply changes like a city shifting from day to night. It's a strange comfort to know that something so alive, so fragile, and yet so ancient exists out there, continuing whether or not anyone watches. Long after lights go out on the shore, long after ships pass overhead, the reef continues its slow work, one small creature at a time. Its patience makes it seem eternal, even though each part of it is temporary. And maybe that's the real secret of its endurance, the ability to turn impermanence into permanence through constant renewal. Somewhere in the Pacific tonight, a coral colony is expanding. Tiny polyps are dividing, attaching, building their skeletal homes. Around them, small fish weave between branches, crabs clean the surfaces, algae glow in the last traces of sunlight. The reef continues layer upon layer, a living monument to patience. It doesn't measure its progress. It doesn't count its years. It simply endures, becoming, dissolving, and becoming again, never stopping, never sleeping. As the currents carry us onward from this glowing labyrinth of stone and life, the story of longevity continues. Beyond the reefs, in the open waters, other beings live long, quiet lives, not in colonies, but as travellers, carrying with them the memories of their ancestors in ways both physical and unseen. Their journeys stretch across oceans and generations, bound by the same patient rhythm that has guided everything we've seen so far. Far from the coral reefs, out in the open blue where the ocean stretches beyond sight, the rhythm of life changes again. Here, in the vastness, where there are no walls of stone or anchored cities of coral, the creatures that live longest are the wanderers. They travel not for speed or conquest, but for the slow unfolding of their own cycles. They move with a patience that seems to belong to another era, crossing distances so great that the planet itself becomes their map. Among them are some of the ocean's most ancient and enduring beings, turtles, whales, and others who have learned to live within the rhythm of deep time. The sea turtle is one of the oldest travellers still alive, a living echo of the age of reptiles. Its ancestors swam alongside creatures that no longer exist, yet its shape has changed little. When a turtle glides through the water, there's a grace in its slowness, as though the ocean itself carries it. It doesn't fight the current, it works with it. The leatherback, the largest of them, can travel across entire oceans, migrating thousands of miles from feeding grounds to nesting beaches. Some live for more than a century, their shells bearing the marks of long journeys, their bodies shaped by decades of endurance. A turtle's life begins in fragility. A handful of eggs buried in sand, warmed by the sun, exposed to chance. The young hatchlings emerge together, instinct driving them toward the waves. Most won't survive. The ocean takes many, but the few that do make it begin a journey that can span the world. They'll spend decades wandering, carried by currents that have been flowing since long before their species evolved. When they finally return to the beach where they were born, sometimes after half a century, it's as if they have completed a loop not just of space, but of time itself. In their endurance lies a kind of quiet determination. The turtle doesn't rush, it doesn't waste energy. It drifts when it can, swims when it must, rests when the ocean allows. Its metabolism adjusts with the temperature of the water, slowing in the cold, waking in the warmth. Everything about it is tuned to conserve. Its slow heartbeat, its calm breathing, its measured movements, all part of a system designed to last. And it does last, longer than most things that move this much ever could. There's something deeply peaceful about the way a sea turtle moves. It doesn't seem burdened by the effort of survival. It lives within its limits, not against them. Its longevity isn't an accident of biology, but reflection of how perfectly it fits within its world. The ocean provides, and it follows. That relationship between pace and persistence appears again and again among the longest-lived creatures. They endure not by racing ahead, but by moving in harmony with their surroundings. Whales, too, belong to that same rhythm, though their scale and sound make them seem like the ocean's great storytellers. They live for decades, some for centuries, carrying the weight of history within their immense bodies. The bowhead whale, found in Arctic waters, can live for more than 200 years, perhaps longer. Some individuals still alive today were born before electricity lit the first human cities. Their skin bears scars from old harpoons, remnants of hunts that ended generations ago. They have survived ice ages and industrial eras, outlasting the ships that once pursued them. The bowhead's longevity, like that of the Greenland shark, is tied to the cold. Its metabolism is slow, its heart steady. Its world changes so gradually that its life stretches across epochs. But there's more to it than temperature. Whales are social, and their survival depends on memory. Shared knowledge passed through generations. They remember migration routes, feeding grounds, and songs. Each population has its own dialect, its own traditions carried in sound. When one sings across the dark expanse of the Arctic, it's sending out a note that could travel for miles, perhaps even hundreds of miles through the dense cold water. That sound, deep and long, is a language of endurance. Whales live in a timescale that makes ours feel frantic. Their migrations take months. Their lives span centuries. Calves learn slowly, growing within communities that have been moving through the same waters for as long as anyone can trace. Their rhythm is one of patience, feeding in the cold, breeding in the warm, repeating that pattern year after year. To live that long, they must conserve energy, avoid waste, and trust in the cycles that sustain them. In a way, they are the ocean's living archives, carrying with them both genetic and cultural memory that connects the present to a far older world. When scientists study bowhead whales, they find traces of human history embedded in their flesh. Stone harpoon tips from the 1800s, fragments of tools from centuries before. The whales survived those encounters, healed, and continue to swim. Their cells regenerate efficiently. Their DNA repair systems are unusually robust. Somehow their biology resists the usual wear of time. Their tissues stay healthy, their hearts remain strong. They are in every sense built to endure the long cold silence of the Arctic. To imagine a life that spans 2 centuries is to imagine a patience beyond understanding. A whale born in the early 1800s would have lived through every transformation of the human world above it without ever seeing one. It would have known the same ice, the same migration routes, the same songs, while civilizations rose and fell in its absence. Its sense of time isn't measured in years, but in cycles of ice and bloom, of feeding and fasting, of long journeys north and south. The ocean's slow breathing becomes its clock. Like the coral reefs and the clams buried beneath the sand, these creatures remind us that longevity is not about defying nature, but embracing it. The turtle doesn't fight the current. The whale doesn't rush its song. Each of them exists within the same pattern the ocean has followed since the beginning. They are, in a way, embodiments of time itself, moving at a pace that allows them to last. Among them, there are others less known but equally patient. The rough-eye rockfish, for example, a deep-sea dweller found in the North Pacific, can live for more than 200 years. It spends its life near the seabed, in cold, dark water, moving slowly, feeding sparingly. Its body grows dense and heavy, its metabolism almost motionless. Like the Greenland shark, it has found a way to stretch time by slowing it. Every heartbeat, every breath, every flick of its fins takes place within a rhythm that doesn't rush. These long-lived creatures are scattered across the ocean's vastness, each an expression of the same truth written in different forms. The ocean rewards stillness. It favours balance. It gives longevity not to the fastest or fiercest, but to those who move with restraint, those who listen to its rhythm rather than forcing their own. In that sense, the sea turtle gliding beneath waves, the whale singing through the deep, and the rockfish resting in silence are all connected. They are keepers of slow time, guardians of a pace that allows the planet itself to breathe. There's a reason why being near such creatures feels calming to us. Watching a whale breach or a turtle surface to breathe feels like witnessing something sacred, not because of their rarity, but because of what they represent. They exist outside our tempo. They remind us of what it's like to live without constant urgency. The ocean is full of these reminders, but few are as graceful or as ancient. When a whale dives, it does so without hurry. It fills its lungs, arches its back, and disappears beneath the surface, descending through layers of fading light into the quiet. Its heartbeat slows to almost nothing. It can stay there for an hour, maybe more, suspended in silence. When it finally rises, it exhales in a burst of mist that catches the light like a brief apparition. In that moment it connects 2 worlds, the air above and the water below. Every breath it takes feels deliberate, each one a small act of endurance, in a life measured by thousands of such moments. The turtle does something similar when it comes up for air. After hours underwater, it surfaces gently, takes one calm breath, and slips back down again. It doesn't linger. It doesn't need to. It's done this its whole life, the same simple action repeated for decades. There's something perfect in that consistency, the way a single act can become a bridge between worlds, repeated over centuries until it becomes timeless. What's remarkable is how these beings have persisted through everything that has changed around them. They've survived shifts in climate, currents and continents. Their ancestors saw the oceans before the polar ice caps formed, before humans learned to sail. They've endured extinction events, yet here they are, still following the same paths, still trusting the same instincts. Their existence is proof that life, when aligned with the rhythm of the planet, can outlast almost anything. And yet even these keepers of slow time are vulnerable. The ocean they depend on is changing faster than ever before. Warm currents disrupt migrations. Plastic and noise invade their world. Some of the oldest species alive are facing threats they were never built to withstand, threats that move too quickly, that alter the balance they rely on. The patience that once ensured their survival now leaves them defenseless against a world in motion. The ocean's rhythm hasn't disappeared, but it's being drowned out by a new kind of tempo, one set by us. Still, the turtles return to their beaches, the whales continue to sing, the rockfish drift through the dark. There's resilience in that persistence, a quiet defiance that isn't rebellion but faith. Life in the ocean has always adapted, though never in haste. It changes through small, careful steps, just as it always has. If given time, it can heal. That's what these ancient creatures remind us, that endurance isn't an instant victory, it's a practice. If you were to float among them, listening not with ears but with attention, you'd feel that patience. The turtle gliding below, the whale calling from afar, the faint crackle of life around you. It all blends into one continuous sound, one heartbeat stretched across centuries. The ocean has been speaking in that tone since before we existed, and these are its translators. They live long not because they resist time, but because they've learned to flow with it. As we move forward from these vast living testaments to endurance, the sea still has more to show. There are creatures even smaller, quieter, and older still, whose existence stretches into deep history, not through motion or migration, but through the invisible persistence of their kind. They've been here since the dawn of life, shaping the ocean long before anything with eyes could see it, continuing now in silence, in the unseen depths, carrying the memory of Earth itself within their microscopic forms. The ocean holds so many different ways to live that it's easy to forget they all follow the same laws. Every creature, from the smallest drifting plankton to the largest whale, faces the same challenge, to stay alive as long as possible with the energy it can find. Yet some last only hours, while others live for centuries. It's a question that has fascinated scientists for generations. Why do some lives burn so quickly, while others stretch across ages? The answer isn't a single rule, but a tapestry of balances between energy, danger, and time. The ocean, with all its contrasts, reveals this more clearly than anywhere else. In the shallow waters near the shore, life moves fast. Warmth, sunlight, and nutrients create a world of abundance. Small fish dart through schools, crustaceans scuttle through the sand, and plankton bloom in great invisible clouds. But with abundance comes risk. Predators are everywhere, and the pace of survival is frantic. A creature here grows quickly, reproduces early, and dies young. It's a race driven by opportunity. Energy is plentiful, but so are mouths waiting to take it. There's no reward for patience in such a world. The faster you grow, the better your chance to pass on your genes before something ends your story. Venture deeper though, and the picture changes. Sunlight fades, temperature drops, and food becomes scarce. Life slows. In these dim regions, evolution favours those who can make a little energy last a long time. Creatures grow slowly, reproduce infrequently, and repair themselves carefully. They live longer not because they were designed to, but because their world allows them to. It's not so much that they choose to take their time, it's that time moves differently around them. The deep sea teaches patience not as a virtue, but as a condition of survival. This pattern, the fast and the fragile versus the slow and the enduring, plays out across almost every ecosystem on Earth. In science, it's sometimes called the pace of life theory. Every species finds its balance between speed and longevity, between risk and stability. Mice live fast and die young because their world is full of danger and opportunity. Elephants live slow and die old because they can afford to. The same principle governs life beneath the waves. The sardine flashes by in a single season. The shark drifts through centuries. Both are successful in their own way. Longevity isn't a prize, it's an adaptation. At its core, The secret to a long life lies in how a creature manages energy and repair. Every living cell is a small engine, constantly burning fuel to keep the body running. That process produces damage, chemical wear that builds up over time. The faster the metabolism, the faster the wear. The ocean's oldest creatures have learned to run those engines slowly. The Greenland shark's heart beats a handful of times each minute. The quahog clam filters water so gradually that its energy use is almost immeasurable. Coral polyps build their skeletons in patient layers. By slowing everything down, they extend not just their lifespan, but their stability. But slowness alone isn't enough. Longevity also requires safety. It's no accident that the longest-lived animals often live in places where danger is rare. The deep sea, the icy Arctic, the buried seabed. In these stable, low-energy environments, life can afford to take its time. Predators are scarce, and the cost of mistakes is lower. On land, such peace is harder to find. The ocean provides it in vast quantities. The creatures that discovered how to exist within it without wasting energy have found the closest thing to timelessness that biology allows. Another piece of the puzzle lies in maintenance. Every cell carries machinery for repairing itself, but not all species invest equally in that maintenance. Short-lived animals put their energy into reproduction. They produce many offspring quickly, accepting that their bodies will wear out. Long-lived species do the opposite. They invest heavily in repair, in keeping their cells healthy for as long as possible. Their DNA repair enzymes are more active, their immune systems more balanced, their proteins more stable. It's like the difference between a firework and a candle. Both give light, but one burns bright and brief, while the other glows steadily for hours. In the ocean, these strategies can be seen in every form of life. The tiny krill swarms that feed whales live fast, producing countless young before vanishing within months. The whales that feed on them live long, repairing their vast bodies year after year. The contrast isn't one of superiority, just of design. Every creature's lifespan fits its role within the larger balance. If krill lived as long as whales, the system would collapse. If whales lived as briefly as krill, the oceans would lose their stability. Longevity and brevity are both essential to the ocean's rhythm. Temperature plays a part too. Cold slows everything down. Chemical reactions, metabolism, even reproduction, all of it moves at a slower pace in cold water. That's why so many of the ocean's oldest species live in frigid depths or polar seas. The cold acts like a natural preservative, protecting molecules from decay and keeping cells in a low-energy state. A creature that lives in warm water might experience the world 10 times faster than one in the cold, aging accordingly. It's not that the cold grants immortality, it simply stretches the same processes over a longer span. There's also size. Larger creatures tend to live longer, not just because of their physical robustness, but because of how their bodies manage time. A whale's heart beats slower than a fish's. A turtle's cells divide more carefully than a shrimp's. The rhythm of life within them runs on a wider clock. But again, size alone isn't the answer. There are tiny beings that live astonishingly long and massive ones that don't. What matters most is how their design matches their environment. The jellyfish that resets itself to youth. The clam that spends centuries filtering silt. Each has found its own way to stretch time. In the grander sense, longevity in the ocean is the result of equilibrium. Every living thing sits somewhere between risk and preservation. The more stable the world it inhabits, the longer it can afford to last. The deep sea is stable because it changes slowly. The surface is chaotic because it changes constantly. Creatures that live near the surface adapt quickly and die young. Those that live in the depths adapt slowly and live long. It's a simple trade, but one that defines the architecture of life beneath the waves. When scientists study these long-lived species, they often find another shared trait: resilience to stress. The Greenland shark's tissues resist toxins that would harm others. The ocean quahog cells can tolerate fluctuations in oxygen. The coral reef can rebuild itself after destruction. In each case, longevity isn't just the absence of decay, it's the ability to recover. Life in the ocean lasts when it knows how to pause, repair, and begin again. That's why regeneration, in various forms, is so common in long-lived creatures. The immortal jellyfish literally resets itself. Corals regrow from fragments. Even whales heal from wounds that would cripple other animals. Longevity isn't stasis, it's renewal. This pattern echoes across the entire web of marine life. The ocean doesn't reward endless growth, it rewards balance. The fastest, hungriest creatures may dominate in the short term, but the ocean's history belongs to the patient ones. The ones that learn to move with the current instead of against it. The ones that found a pace that matched the pulse of the planet. When we look at a clam that lived for 500 years or a whale that swam through centuries, what we're really seeing is an organism that found harmony with its environment so complete that time lost its usual grip. Humans are drawn to that idea because we struggle with it ourselves. We live at a pace that nature never intended, chasing longevity through technology while ignoring the rhythm that sustains it. The ocean shows us, again and again, that longevity comes not from conquering time, but from surrendering to it. Every long-lived creature does this instinctively. It doesn't fight the conditions of its world, it integrates with them. That's why their lifespans seem almost unreal to us. They're not breaking the rules, they're following them perfectly. The ocean's lessons about longevity extend beyond biology. They reveal how stability, balance, and moderation shape endurance in every system. A coral reef thrives when it grows slowly enough to stay strong. A current remains steady when it moves within its bounds. The planet itself remains habitable when its cycles are allowed to play out without interruption. Longevity, at every level, depends on rhythm and restraint. When that rhythm is broken by temperature shifts, pollution, or haste, time speeds up, and what once took centuries to change begins to unravel in years. Even in that fragility, though, the ocean reminds us that repair is always possible. Every ecosystem has its thresholds, its capacity to heal if given space. The long-lived species, in their quiet way, embody that hope. They persist not because they are untouched by change, but because they have learned to absorb it without breaking. They've turned adaptation into an art of endurance, responding slowly, deliberately, but effectively. Somewhere deep below the surface, perhaps right now, a Greenland shark is gliding through black water, unaware of how extraordinary its lifespan is. Near the seabed, a clam filters, building another ring into its shell. Far to the south, a coral reef breathes at night, its polyps stretching out beneath the stars. These creatures have no sense of time as we do. They don't count their days, yet their bodies contain the story of time itself, the slow accumulation of life that never truly ends, only changes form. So why do some lives last longer than others? Because the ocean, in all its vastness, allows for many ways to measure time. Some species live quickly, filling the water with motion and light, burning bright and brief. Others live slowly, shaping the world in ways that last beyond generations. Neither way is wrong. Both are part of the same system. Longevity isn't superiority, it's variation. It's the reflection of how many different solutions life has found to the same question, how to continue. And that perhaps is the quiet truth that runs beneath all of it. The longest lived beings of the sea don't live long for the sake of living long. They live long because they fit perfectly within the story the ocean is telling. Their rhythm matches the rhythm of the water. Their patience mirrors the patience of the tides. In that harmony, they find endurance, not through strength or dominance, but through alignment. If you were to listen closely to the sea right now, you might hear that rhythm. Not the waves at the surface, but the slow pulse beneath them. The breathing of the planet, the heartbeat of everything that has learned how to last. It's the sound of time stretched thin, of energy used wisely, of life unfolding exactly as it should. The creatures that hear it best are the ones that live longest. They don't hurry, they don't resist. They simply continue, quietly, as they always have. Time in the ocean doesn't follow the rules we live by. It doesn't tick or measure itself in seconds. It moves differently, through cycles that overlap and repeat until they blur into something continuous. Beneath the surface, the ocean runs on a kind of clockwork, an invisible mechanism that keeps the planet's balance steady, shaping everything from weather to life. This clock isn't made of gears or numbers. It's made of currents, temperatures, light, and chemistry. It turns so slowly that most creatures never notice it, and yet it governs everything that happens in the sea. If you could see that hidden machinery, you'd realize that the ocean's movements are more precise than anything humans have ever built. Every drop of water follows a path. The surface currents, driven by wind and heat, drift across the globe in great loops. Beneath them, colder, heavier water sinks and flows back in the opposite direction. This circulation, often called the global conveyor belt, is the ocean's bloodstream. It takes nearly 1,000 years for a single parcel of water to complete the journey, from the freezing depths of the Arctic to the warm shallows of the Pacific, then back again. That slow circulation is part of the planet's memory. It stores heat, distributes nutrients, and sets the rhythm for everything living within it. When we talk about the ocean's clockwork, we're really talking about time written in movement. Each current has its schedule, each tide its pulse, each wave its repetition. The tides are the most familiar, rising and falling every few hours, drawn by the pull of the moon. But they are just the smallest gears in a system that spans centuries. The deep currents far below shift so gradually that they seem still. They move heat around the world, connecting every sea into one continuous body. When that circulation slows or changes, entire climates shift with it. Ice ages begin and end because the ocean adjusts its timing. The coral reefs bloom and die according to those same long rhythms. The creatures we call ancient live within those cycles, not outside them. At the surface, where light meets air, time feels fast. Waves break and vanish. Fish flash past. Clouds move overhead. But the deeper you go, the slower it becomes. The ocean's layers are like pages in a book written at different speeds. The surface changes by the minute. The mid-waters shift by the season. The depths change by the century. The oldest living beings, the sharks, the clams, the corals, are the keepers of that slowest time. They live in the deep chapters of the book, where the words are written carefully, where nothing rushes. Their long lives aren't anomalies, they're reflections of the tempo around them. Every layer of the sea has its rhythm, and together they form a vast, synchronized pattern. The sun heats the surface, warm water rises, cold water sinks, nutrients circulate upward, and the process repeats endlessly. The ocean breathes this way. Its inhalation and exhalation are measured not in seconds but in generations. The creatures that live within it adapt to the pace of their surroundings. Some align themselves with the fast cycles of tides and light, others with the slow drift of currents and seasons. This alignment is the ocean's secret clockwork, an unspoken synchronization that keeps every living thing in time. When plankton bloom in the spring, it's not random. It happens because sunlight has returned, because the water has mixed just enough to bring nutrients from the depths. Fish spawn soon after, feeding on the plankton. Larger animals follow the fish. The timing is precise, yet no one directs it. The ocean keeps time through physics and light, through temperature and gravity. Its creatures simply follow. When that timing falters, when the water warms too soon, or the currents shift, everything above feels the echo. The rhythm breaks, and the balance trembles. For millions of years, the ocean's clock has kept this rhythm. It has survived continental shifts, meteor impacts, and changing atmospheres. Its mechanisms adjust, but they never stop. Even in its stillest moments, it's moving. slow, deliberate, unstoppable. The deep water that sinks near Greenland today will not rise again until long after every human alive has vanished. By then, new species will have evolved, and yet that same water will carry the chemical memory of this century. It will remember us, quietly, through temperature and composition. The ocean's clock doesn't forget. It keeps perfect time in ways we can barely comprehend. The creatures that live longest in the ocean have become part of that clock. Their bodies record the slow oscillations of their environment. A coral skeleton holds the story of warm and cold years. A whale's earwax, layered like tree rings, tells of migrations and feasts. A clam's shell preserves centuries of chemical history. Even the Greenland shark's eyes carry carbon traces of the time in which it was born. Each of these beings is a fragment of the ocean's timekeeping system, a living record of the water's pulse. They don't just exist in the sea, they embody it. When scientists study these records, they're not just learning about biology, they're listening to the ocean's clock. Every stable isotope, every growth band, every trace of temperature is a tick of that ancient mechanism. The coral tells us when the sea was warmer. The clam reveals when food was scarce. The whale remembers when the ice receded. Together they form a chronology more accurate than any written history. Humans count years by calendars. The ocean counts them in chemistry. There's a reason why everything long-lived in the sea moves slowly. It's not only about conserving energy, it's about staying in sync. The ocean's pace is steady, and creatures that rush fall out of rhythm. The ones that last are those that match it perfectly. The Greenland shark's pulse is slow because the water's temperature demands it. The coral's growth is deliberate because the chemistry of the sea allows no haste. The quahog clam filters steadily because that's the speed of the current. None of them can afford to rush without breaking the pattern that sustains them. Longevity, in this sense, is a form of synchronization. What's astonishing is how interconnected all of it is. A current that begins in one hemisphere eventually shapes life on the other side of the world. The nutrients stirred in one sea feed creatures half a planet away. The migration of a whale aligns with the bloom of plankton that began as a seasonal shift in sunlight months earlier. Every pulse in one corner of the ocean is echoed somewhere else. That is the real machinery beneath the waves, a global orchestra keeping time without a conductor. The ocean's secret clockwork doesn't rely on awareness or design. It functions through consistency, through the same physical principles that have governed it since the planet formed. And like any clock, it can be disrupted. When the temperature rises beyond its natural range, the gears slip. The deep currents that have moved the same way for millennia begin to falter. Warm water lingers where it shouldn't. Cold water fails to sink. The balance between oxygen and carbon shifts. To the creatures that live by this clock, even small changes are seismic. The coral loses its colour. The plankton bloom at the wrong time. The fish arrive too early or too late. The timing breaks, and with it, the continuity of lives that have endured for centuries. But for now, much of the ocean's clock still holds. Its deeper gears, the ones that move on scales of hundreds or thousands of years, are still turning. Deep currents still rise and fall. The tides still pull against the shore. The cold still flows where it always has. And within that slow machinery, life continues, adjusting, waiting, enduring. The creatures that live longest are those that can absorb small disruptions without losing their rhythm. They adapt slowly but surely, recalibrating themselves to the ocean's new beat. There's something profoundly humbling in realizing that every movement in the sea, every current, every migration, every breath of a whale or drift of plankton is connected through this unseen timing. The ocean doesn't simply contain life, it organizes it. It's both the stage and the metronome. Every creature that survives within it must find its place in the rhythm. Even the smallest misstep can echo across the system. When you look at it this way, longevity becomes not just a biological trait, but a form of cooperation. To live long in the ocean is to align oneself perfectly with its timing, to use energy at the rate the environment allows, to reproduce when the cycle calls for it, to trust the pattern without forcing it. That's why the oldest lives belong to the calmest. They aren't trying to outsmart time. They are time, expressed through flesh and motion. If you could follow a single drop of seawater on its 1,000-year journey, you'd see how deeply that synchronization runs. You'd watch it sink in the Arctic, drift across basins, pass through trenches, rise again near the equator, and return as rain. Along the way, it would feed plankton, cool storms, dissolve mountains, and carry memories of every encounter. It's a form of time that's physical, not abstract, measured in motion and transformation. The creatures living within it are shaped by that same rhythm. They are not separate from the ocean's clockwork. They are the gears. Sometimes it's easy to forget that our own lives depend on that mechanism too. The air we breathe, the food we eat, the climate we live in, all are regulated by the ocean's timing. When it slows or speeds, we feel it on land. The balance that allows coral to grow and sharks to age also keeps our seasons steady. The ocean's patience sustains the planet. Its clockwork doesn't only mark time, it maintains it. Somewhere beneath the surface, the machinery is still turning. The cold water sinks. The currents flow. The light fades and returns. Fish hatch, grow, and vanish in endless cycles. The deep ocean hums quietly, indifferent to haste, keeping the world's oldest rhythm alive. It doesn't need to announce itself. Its work is constant, invisible, perfect. And within that quiet movement, the creatures that have lived longest continue to drift, breathe, and endure. They are part of the mechanism now, silent cogs in the ocean's endless clock. If you could listen closely enough, you might hear it. Not the crash of waves or the call of whales, but something deeper, the slow beat of a planet's heart, keeping time through salt and motion. That's the ocean's secret clockwork, still running, still precise, still holding the world together one patient turn at a time. The ocean has always been a place where time stretches, where the idea of age takes on forms we can barely imagine. Down here, longevity isn't about numbers or milestones. It isn't a record to be broken. It's a way of existing that feels closer to rhythm than to duration. To live long beneath the waves is to be in tune with the deep, slow pulse of the planet, to move at the pace of water, to let time pass through you rather than chase after it. For the creatures that inhabit these endless blue worlds, a long life isn't simply survival. It's participation in something continuous. If you could stand at the bottom of the sea and watch time unfold, you wouldn't see it as motion. You'd see it as repetition. A whale crossing the same migration route her ancestors swam 100 years ago. A coral colony rebuilding after a storm, growing from the same limestone base that's been there for thousands of years. A Greenland shark drifting through the same dark channel it's known for centuries. None of these beings think of themselves as old. They're not counting the years. Their existence isn't defined by beginning or end, only by the ongoing act of living. Longevity in this world is inseparable from patience. Everything that lasts long enough to matter must slow down. The deep sea creatures, the cold water dwellers, the coral architects, they all move with restraint. They breathe slowly, grow carefully, and waste nothing. They've learned that endurance isn't about avoiding change, but about moving so gently that change never catches up to you. They don't age the way we do because they don't resist the environment that shapes them. They let the ocean flow through them, and in doing so, they become part of it. That harmony gives long life a different meaning beneath the waves. On land, we tend to think of longevity as victory, as a triumph over time. Down here it's the opposite, it's acceptance. The turtle that glides through open water doesn't live long because it's stronger than its predators. It lives long because it wastes no effort. The coral doesn't endure because it's invulnerable. It endures because it shares its strength with others. The clam doesn't survive 5 centuries because it hides. It survives because its pace matches the slow chemistry of its surroundings. Every creature that endures has learned to belong completely. To belong in the ocean is to give up control. The waves decide your path. The current determines your speed. Food arrives when it arrives. Danger comes without warning. The creatures that live longest are the ones that stopped fighting those conditions and learned to move with them. The Greenland shark drifts with the current, letting it carry her through the dark. The bowhead whale migrates with the ice, trusting the seasons to guide her. Even the microscopic algae that power coral reefs rise and sink each day with the sun's warmth. None of them hurry. None of them hold on too tightly. The ocean rewards that kind of surrender. It gives longevity to the ones that synchronize, that listen, that adapt without resistance. It's not a moral lesson. It's physics, chemistry, evolution. But it carries a quiet truth. Everything that lasts does so by cooperating with its surroundings. To be ancient beneath the waves is to be adaptable, humble, and balanced. The ocean doesn't remember names or faces, but it remembers patterns. It remembers what works, and what works tends to move slowly. Long life beneath the sea isn't just biological. It's geological, ecological, planetary. Coral reefs, for example, are living structures that function like memory. They hold centuries of growth and decay in their layers. A reef that began forming 10,000 years ago still contains the calcium shells of organisms that lived at its foundation. When a storm breaks part of it, fragments drift away and seed new reefs. It's an unbroken continuity. The same can be said for the great kelp forests of the Pacific or the seagrass meadows of the Mediterranean. They expand, collapse, and return in cycles so long that human history barely registers beside them. They live through transformation rather than against it. To live long in the ocean often means to exist in layers, one life giving rise to another, generations stacked like sediment. A clamshell becomes the home of a barnacle, which becomes the perch of a sponge, which becomes the shelter of a shrimp. Each creature's life extends the last, so that longevity isn't an individual achievement but a shared inheritance. The ocean doesn't separate life from its remains. It recycles, reuses, reclaims. Even the longest-lived creatures eventually become part of someone else's survival. A whale's body, when it sinks to the seafloor, becomes a feast that can sustain entire communities for decades. In that way, the whale continues, its lifespan extending through others. The boundary between living and lasting dissolves. There's a particular kind of peace in that idea. It suggests that endurance isn't about holding on forever, but about leaving something behind that can continue without you. The ocean's ancient creatures seem to understand this in their own wordless way. The coral leaves skeletons, the clam leaves shells, the whale leaves nutrients that feed new life. Even the plankton that live for only a day leave chemical traces that shape the future of the sea. Every existence contributes to the slow unfolding of time beneath the waves. Longevity, seen this way, becomes less about survival and more about participation in continuity. The longer a creature lives, the more deeply it becomes part of the system around it. A coral reef, 1,000 years old, doesn't just occupy space, it defines it. The reef creates its own world, altering currents, filtering water, generating oxygen. The same is true of the oldest whales, whose migrations stir nutrients that feed the ocean's surface. Even the clams, resting silently in the mud, help regulate carbon and maintain the chemistry of the sea. The long-lived are not passive observers, they are the stabilizers of the planet's cycles. Their very existence makes the world more durable. In human terms, we often measure a life by its events, by what happens within it. But in the ocean, longevity isn't marked by milestones. It's marked by rhythm. The shark doesn't celebrate 100 years. It continues the same quiet hunt. The turtle doesn't mark her return to the beach as an accomplishment. It's simply what she does. Their lives have no endings or beginnings as we understand them, only continuation. Time is circular here, not linear. The same movements repeat, and within that repetition lies endurance. It's tempting to see that as monotony, but it's not. it's balance. Every repetition renews the world around it. The coral that spawns each year replenishes the reef. The whale that migrates returns nutrients to the surface. The turtle that nests ensures that her species continues. Long life, then, isn't just about individual duration, but about maintaining cycles that extend beyond oneself. To live long is to take part in something that doesn't end. Even the smallest creatures reflect this truth. Deep-sea sponges, some of the oldest animals ever found, grow in silence for thousands of years. They don't move, don't seek, don't change their place. Yet their slow filtration helps cleanse the ocean. They survive not because they adapt to each change, but because their steadiness provides a foundation for other lives. In their stillness, they anchor the rhythm of the sea. They are less like creatures and more like instruments within the ocean's music, tones so low and slow that only the planet itself can hear them. To understand what long life means beneath the waves, you have to let go of the idea that it's a privilege. It's more like a responsibility. A being that lasts centuries carries the memory of its environment within its body. It must remain in harmony with that environment to survive. A coral that grows too fast collapses. A whale that strays from its migration loses its bearings. A clam that filters too quickly depletes its resources. Longevity demands restraint, precision, and awareness, qualities we often overlook when we think of survival. It's not just about avoiding death. It's about living well enough to continue without disturbing what allows you to live. There's a quiet intelligence in that, a kind of wisdom that doesn't require thought. The ocean's long-lived creatures seem to operate on understanding deeper than instinct. They move as though they know that every action affects the whole. The shark's slow metabolism, the coral's measured growth, the turtle's calm migration, all of it forms part of a network that sustains balance. That's what longevity means here. Being so perfectly aligned with the world that you no longer stand apart from it. Sometimes the ocean seems like a mirror for what endurance looks like when it's stripped of ego. There's no pride in being ancient here. No fear of aging, no resistance to decay. Things simply are. A coral reef grows, dies, and grows again. A whale lives, dies, and becomes the base of a new ecosystem. Even the skeletons of the dead are folded back into the living. The ocean wastes nothing, and in that endless recycling, life becomes timeless. To last here is to contribute to that ongoing transformation. From the surface, it's easy to miss this subtle exchange. The sea seems vast and indifferent, its motion repetitive, its creatures anonymous. But beneath that appearance is a system that runs on quiet generosity. The long-lived beings of the ocean are its guardians not because they choose to be, but because their very existence provides continuity. They keep the rhythms stable. They hold the line between chaos and order. They are the living framework of time itself, ensuring that each new generation inherits a world still capable of supporting life. When we speak of long life on land, we often mean longevity within a single lifetime. In the ocean, it's different. Longevity stretches across forms and generations. A coral colony may live for thousands of years, but its strength comes from countless individual lives overlapping. A whale's genetic lineage may continue for centuries, each calf carrying memories encoded in DNA. The ocean's concept of longevity is collective. It doesn't belong to an individual. It belongs to the cycle that allows individuals to exist. If you could step outside of human time and watch the ocean's long-lived creatures over millennia, you'd see continuity, not change. The same migrations looping endlessly, the same reefs rebuilding themselves, the same species rising and fading, each leaving something behind that shapes the next. That is what long life means here. Not permanence, but participation in an unending rhythm. There's a kind of comfort in that realization. To live long beneath the waves is to belong completely to a world that never stops renewing itself. It's to know, in every cell, that time isn't an enemy but a medium, a current you move through, neither resisting nor controlling it. It's to exist without haste, without fear, in a state of constant becoming. The ocean holds this truth quietly, without explanation. It doesn't teach or warn, it simply continues. And the creatures that last longest are the ones that have learned to listen. They remind us, in their slow movements and ancient lives, that time is not something to be conquered, it's something to be inhabited. Far below the surface, those beings continue their patient existence even now. The whale glides through the cold, the clam filters in darkness, the coral breathes at night, the turtle moves with the current. None of them know they are ancient. None of them care. They are simply part of the ocean's continuity, each heartbeat another note in the slowest song ever written. And somewhere in that vast, resonant silence, the meaning of long life becomes clear, not as duration or victory, but as alignment. To live long beneath the waves is to be in step with the oldest rhythm of all, to let yourself move as the sea moves, to last not by holding on, but by letting go. The ocean at night doesn't sleep, it softens. The surface loses its shimmer, the light fades into a deep cobalt calm, and the motion of everything slows until it feels like the sea itself is exhaling. From above, the darkness looks endless, but beneath it, the world remains alive. Tiny specks of light flicker in the distance, drifting plankton glowing with soft bioluminescence, pulsing like the heartbeat of the planet. The creatures of the deep move through that faint glow without sound, their shapes blending into the current, their lives unfolding at a pace almost invisible to us. Down here, the lines between moment and eternity blur until they disappear. There's a kind of stillness that exists only underwater, a sense that everything, even time, is suspended. When you watch it long enough, the movement of the ocean begins to feel less like motion and more like breathing. The tides inhale and exhale. The currents drift like thoughts moving through sleep. The sand shifts and settles as if dreaming. It's a rhythm older than memory, older than language, older than the idea of time itself. Everything that lives in this world, from the smallest microbe to the oldest whale, is bound to that rhythm. It isn't something they obey, it's something they are. At the edges of that endless blue, where the sea meets the surface and the air begins again, the boundary is thin. Light from distant stars trembles on the waves, distorted but still there. Somewhere out there, a whale rises for air, its breath erupting in a cloud that glows faintly in the moonlight before vanishing back into silence. Far below, a shark glides through black water, ancient and unhurried. A sea turtle drifts on the current, eyes half closed, guided by instincts written into its blood long before continents found their places. All of them, in their own way, are part of the same continuity, the same living memory that the ocean keeps without words. It's strange to think that the sea has witnessed everything that's ever happened on this planet, and yet remains unchanged in its essence. Civilizations have come and gone, species have risen and vanished, and still the ocean continues its steady work, eroding, renewing, balancing. It doesn't cling to the past, and it doesn't rush toward the future. It just is. That constancy gives it a kind of wisdom. It knows that life doesn't need to hurry to endure. It knows that endings are not failures, they're transitions. The coral that dies feeds the coral that grows. The whale that falls becomes a home for new lives. The clam that stops filtering leaves behind the mineral trace that shapes another ecosystem. Longevity in the ocean has always been a form of generosity. When you listen closely enough, you begin to understand that everything beneath the surface is connected by exchange. The long-lived creatures don't exist apart from the fleeting ones. They depend on them. The plankton that lives for a day feeds the fish that lives for years. The fish feeds the whale that lives for centuries. The whale, in death, feeds the bacteria that begin the cycle again. It's a kind of endless conversation, one that happens without words or awareness. carried on by the chemistry of the sea. Every particle, every movement, every breath contributes to the continuation of everything else. The ocean doesn't distinguish between the short-lived and the eternal. To it, all time is equal. What matters isn't how long something lasts, but how completely it belongs. That's the quiet lesson written in the lives of the ancient ones. The shark, the clam, the coral, the whale, the turtle. They don't live long because they try to. They live long because they have no reason not to. Their existence doesn't fight the current of change. It flows with it. In that acceptance lies their endurance. The more you think about it, the more the ocean begins to feel like a mirror of life itself. Its calmness hides 1,000 movements. Its surface conceals unimaginable depths. It holds storms and silences in the same body. It remembers everything but clings to nothing. Even the light that enters it is absorbed, transformed, turned into something new. Every wave that rises must fall. Every current that drifts must return. The sea knows impermanence better than any philosopher ever could, and yet it continues endlessly, patient, whole. Above the waves, the air shifts constantly. Clouds move, winds rise and fade. We mark time by these changes. Down below, time is texture, not direction. The sand that rolls across the seafloor today will one day become stone. The bones of a whale might rest for centuries before they're buried and reborn as sediment. Every layer of ocean history settles slowly, pressing into the foundation of the earth. That's what long life really means here. It's not about outlasting the world, but becoming part of its foundation. The oldest creatures, in their stillness and quiet endurance, are the architects of stability. If you were to drift there, suspended in the water at night, you might feel that vastness pressing gently against you, not as weight, but as presence. The ocean doesn't rush to reveal itself. It allows understanding only through patience. You begin to notice how light filters downward in faint blue gradients, how small organisms move in patterns that seem random but are not, how each sound carries farther underwater, connecting everything in a low hum. That hum, constant and soft, is what the planet sounds like when it breathes. You can't mark it on a clock or record it in measures. It has no tempo because it doesn't need one. Somewhere a school of fish turns as one body, moving as if guided by thought. Their synchronized motion isn't planned, it's instinctive, a shared awareness that keeps them safe. The same harmony exists at every level of the ocean. The reefs, the currents, the tides, they all move together, self-regulating, adjusting, compensating. It's a balance too complex to design and too subtle to fully see. The creatures that live longest are simply the ones that embody it best. Their patience isn't learned, it's inherited from the sea itself. If you look at it that way, every long-lived being in the ocean is an expression of the sea's memory. They are not just residents of their world, they are its continuity. Each one carries within it the record of how the ocean has changed, adapted, endured. The coral skeleton holds the chemical trace of past climates. The whale's migrations track the history of currents. The shark's tissue reflects centuries of temperature and diet. Together they form the living memory of the planet's largest system. We can study them, measure them, and learn from them, but even that understanding feels small compared to the quiet immensity of what they represent. It's easy to imagine that the ocean's ancient inhabitants feel nothing of this, that they exist without thought, driven only by instinct. But perhaps feeling isn't necessary for meaning. Perhaps meaning lies simply in participation, in being part of something vast and continuous. The turtle returning to its birthplace after 50 years doesn't know it's fulfilling a pattern older than humanity, yet it does. The coral rebuilding after destruction doesn't know it's repairing the foundation of an ecosystem, yet it does. The ocean doesn't require awareness to sustain wisdom. It exists through repetition, and in that repetition, it finds truth. Sometimes, when people stand on the shore and watch the waves roll in, They describe the feeling as timelessness. It's not that time disappears, it's that it widens. You begin to sense the scale at which the ocean lives. The waves that reach your feet may have started thousands of miles away. The wind that shapes them carries the warmth of another hemisphere. Each drop of water has travelled through countless forms before touching the shore. Cloud, rain, current, tide. You realise then that the sea is not a place, it's a process. And within that process, everything that lives long enough becomes part of something eternal. The creatures that live the longest beneath the waves remind us of something we easily forget, that endurance and peace are not opposites. They are the same act performed at different scales. The shark's slow journey, the coral's steady growth, the clam's patient filtering, each is an expression of balance, of being precisely in tune with one's world. That's what longevity truly means here. It's not resistance to time, it's unity with it. If you listen closely to the water, you might hear faint clicks and songs far below. Whales communicating across distances so great that their voices arrive as echoes of each other. Its sound stretched across miles, connecting individuals who may never meet but who belong to the same conversation. The ocean's long-lived beings are always speaking, though not in words. They speak through presence, through motion, through rhythm, through continuity. Their lives, each lasting centuries or millennia, are part of a single collective sentence the sea has been speaking since the beginning. And above all that sound, above the hum of currents and the shifting of tides, there's silence. A silence so deep it feels like the world itself is pausing between breaths. In that silence, everything seems infinite. The sea turtle drifting alone beneath the stars, the coral glowing faintly in the dark, the ancient shark tracing her slow path through the cold. They all move through it like thoughts that never end. Their lives are not stories with beginnings and conclusions. They are ongoing conditions, chapters in a book without an ending. That's the nature of time beneath the waves. It doesn't conclude. The ocean doesn't finish what it starts, it transforms it. What dies feeds what grows, what fades becomes foundation, what disappears returns in another form. Longevity, in the sea's language, isn't duration but renewal. The creatures that live the longest are simply the most fluent in that language. They know how to exist without resisting the inevitable, how to last by changing, how to age without ending. As the night deepens, the glow from the plankton fades, the waves soften even more and the ocean seems to fold itself into quiet reflection. It doesn't stop moving, it never does, but the movement becomes slower, more deliberate, as if the entire planet is sighing. Somewhere beyond the horizon, dawn is already beginning, though it hasn't yet reached these waters. The sea waits for it, unbothered, patient as always. In its depths, the oldest creatures continue their slow dance through the currents, unhurried, unchanged, perfectly in time with the ancient clockwork that keeps the world alive. Maybe that's where the meaning lies, not in how long they live, but in how peacefully they do it. The ocean's elders teach us without words that life doesn't need to be measured to be full, that stillness is not emptiness, that to exist quietly is to endure completely. They move as the water moves, they breathe as the water breathes, and when their long lives finally dissolve back into the sea, they become part of the rhythm that will carry on long after them. The ocean beneath the endless blue is still breathing now. Every current, every ripple, every slow turn of the tide continues as it always has. The creatures that dwell within it, from the youngest plankton to the oldest whale, all share that same pulse. There's no hierarchy, no rush, no finish line, just continuity. Just life unfolding at its own pace, soft, steady, eternal. Somewhere, right now, the world above sleeps while the world below hums quietly. Patient and awake, the ocean doesn't dream, it remembers. And in its memory, everything that has ever lived still drifts, still moves, still belongs.